Brain rots, brain rots.
Welcome back to the comment section. I'm Brett Cooper. And today, guys, we need to discuss something that has genuinely been pissing me off, and I think that is the nicest way that I can introduce this episode. For some context, on Friday, I was out of the office and I attended the college graduation of my new sister-in-law.
How does the moon work? And why can we eat salad but not grass?
And it made me so emotional. I was not expecting it whatsoever. We drove down there, everybody's there, the family's there. Oh, it's so much fun. It's so sweet, so happy. Everybody's laughing. I'm sitting there as they're giving the commencement address, as there's the guest speaker, and I'm just like, I was so emotional. And you guys might laugh at me and you're like, oh, Brett, you just cry a lot. But I was genuinely so touched. And obviously in part because, it's kind of like a proud sister moment and I love her. But I also didn't really expect how sad it was going to make me feel for myself and so many of my peers who had this huge, momentous bucket list item in their lives stripped away from them because of COVID. And as you guys know, I was homeschooled, so I didn't have a high school graduation, and I was already doing dual enrollment classes at a community college at that time, so I didn't really have like a final moment of my high school career either. And so I was so excited to go to a university and then graduate. I dreamed about going to college for so many years because I am literally a nerd. But then I spent the majority of my university experience online in Zoom classes, and I didn't have a graduation, which was genuinely crushing. And now
It's interesting that she didn't get a graduation, because I did. I got a graduation, and I mean, our stuff was like Zoe's, for example, was delayed, like, because she actually would have graduated during the lockdown, whereas ours was the year after lockdown. But I think a lot of things were still really weird when my graduation stuff happened. Like, they were, like, the amount of people you could invite to graduation was still limited, and not just because of the capacity of the location, but because of COVID restrictions that were still in place, even a year later. But with, I believe, Zoe, I'd have to ask her, but I'm pretty sure Zoe and her people, because she graduated a year early, or she graduated early. I think hers was hers that May, or was it in December? You know what? I'll text her and ask. I genuinely can't remember. Oh my God, what the shit? Okay. I don't know if she's available right now or not. It's a Monday. I don't know if she has classes right now. I'm not familiar with her school schedule. No, she wouldn't have classes. Finals was last week. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I don't know if she's busy or not. So I don't know if she'll even be able to get back to me. But I feel like her stuff was fucked up by COVID, if I'm remembering correctly, because it would have either been December of 2020. Oh, she just opened it, actually. So we don't even have to wait very long. It was delayed a year. So they still got to walk, but it was just late. I thought Harding got it 2 years later. Yeah, I don't think mine was delayed at all. Since it, again, was in 2021. But it's wild to me that her people just didn't even bother trying to give her one. Like I said, Zoe's was delayed. Like, they pushed it back. It's a bit odd.
This is happening again for different reasons. And I am so angry on behalf of all of these students.
Okay, Zoe said, oh, right. Okay, because she ended up having her graduation around the same time I did, but a lot of people did end up going to the physical, like the in-person one, because they'd have to come back to Bowling Green to do their, like, to the campus to do their graduation, and a lot of them had already moved away. So it wasn't really, so it was a bit underwhelming. It was really just for the people who were still around. She said it was supposed to be in May 2020, and then they pushed it back to December, and then pushed it back again to May of 2021. So I feel really bad for all the kids who had to do, the kids and then the adults, all the kids who were graduating high school during 2020, and then starting college in 2020, because it was hard enough doing classes and everything when you were already in the middle of school. It was already complicated enough as it is. I can't imagine having to deal with it while finishing high school or finishing college that same year. Because like Zoe finished college, but then she's still in school, so she didn't move away or anything. She wasn't having to try to enter the workforce during COVID. And I can't imagine trying to graduate and then start college during COVID. Like, that sounds awful. Because like I said, it was awful enough just continuing school. Zoe says hello. They did a virtual one for us that barely anyone attended. Then we fought for a proper one that was attempted to be downgraded to a building. Then we fought to get it done in the official place in the marquee by the lighthouse on the Plymouth Harbor. Zoe also had her master's graduation in 2021, so they run together in her head, which is why she's struggling to remember what all happened as well. So she had essentially 2 graduations at once, and then mine was also like a week before or a week after or something like that. It really wasn't that long ago. I don't know why I can't remember. Like, it really wasn't that long ago. Like, I can't remember if she came or not to mine. I'm pretty sure she did, but I can't remember for sure. Oh, it really wasn't that long ago. But my brain is just like, nah, memories, who needs those? She can't remember either, so I don't feel as bad about the fact that I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember shit, huh? Yeah, I think my brother and his wife came, but I think those were the only ones who were there. I don't think my sister was able to come. I don't think Chris was able to come. I genuinely can't remember. I just remember being dead named at my graduation and my parents not giving enough of a fuck to ask and come. So I genuinely don't remember. I think Logan and his wife were there. But I think I feel like there was someone else there. in the crowd. But I can't remember who. I don't think it was Jillian. Jillian wouldn't have come up for that, I don't think. Because I know I didn't go to hers either. I can't remember. I can't remember. That's so bad. I can't remember. I would ask Max, because Max would know, but I'm not in contact with Max at the moment. That's annoying. Anyways.
Students. Before we dive in, though, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the context here is the pro-Palestine protests that are happening on college campuses right now. I'm sure that you have seen them on social media if you are online, even in the smallest bit, and they have just gotten...
This is what she's talking about, because I know some of the... She's going to cover it a little bit, but I know some of the colleges that are having these protests right now are essentially... Not necessarily... I don't think they're canceling graduation, but I know that they're banning people from coming to graduation by suspending them right at the very end of their school year.
So intense, so widespread, and so violent that some schools are now completely scrapping their graduations. Because obviously it is graduation season right now, but they're...
I love her saying so violent. The protests that are happening aren't violent. The protests are only becoming violent, generally either when police are intervening or when counter-protesters are causing violence. For example, I believe it was UCLA where the counter-protesters, the pro-Israel protesters who showed up to the encampment, attacked the encampment, and were being incredibly violent towards those protesters. And the pro-Palestine protesters were not retaliating, but the police officers also weren't stepping in to stop the violence, despite the fact that the counter-protesters were, being very, very violent and like spraying mace and blowing up fireworks and ripping down barriers and beating the shit out of people. The police stood by for like over an hour, I think, and just didn't intervene and just let the counter-protesters be violent. But the protests themselves have not been violent. There may have been one or two violent people at certain protests, but that were on the pro-Palestine side. I know there have been some people on the pro-Palestine side that have said heinous things, but then were cast out by the protesters and the schools. It's overall, these protests have been incredibly peaceful and incredibly well organized, and to paint them as so violent is inaccurate and not unexpected, to be fair, from this. So
campuses are overrun by people in tents, breaking into buildings, attacking people, tasing people on campus. That happened at UCLA this morning, that they're just canceling graduations. And the worst part is that this year, the graduating seniors who are being impacted by all of this are the same graduating seniors who had their high school careers ruined by COVID, who had graduations canceled, who spent the first 2 years of their college experience online at home with their parents. And once again, they are getting the short end of the stick. 4 years later, their incredibly important life experiences are getting ruined because of thousands of entitled brats across the country. And that is literally...
I love her labeling them as... love her labeling... Not to mention that the fact that on some of these campuses they've done polling to see how many of the students support these protests, and it's an overwhelming majority. And on all the campuses where they've done the polling for that, it's an overwhelming majority, like 60-70% of students support the movements, even if they aren't being able to actively participate. So I love her. I love her labeling these people. I don't want to call them kids, because most people in college aren't legally children. Like, a lot of them are under 21, but they aren't under 18. Like the youngest you're going to find on campus is 17, maybe 16-year-olds, if they graduated high school early. But so I don't want to call them kids, even though they are all younger than me. But I love her labeling them as entitled brats for, standing against genocide and not wanting their tuition dollars to support a genocide. I don't agree with these campuses canceling the graduations, but I don't agree with that. I think it's wrong, but I think that the campuses should just be giving into the demands of their students, because quite frankly, that's the only reason they have any money, is because of the students that go to their school. I think the graduations being canceled is just a way to get people like Brett riled up. to be like, see, this is why the protests are bad, because they're anti-Semitic and they're making it where these students can't graduate. And it's like, but the campuses don't have to cancel graduations. Like, they don't have to do that. Like, worst case scenario, if it is because they're so violent, they could just push back the graduation a couple months or something like that. Like, also, a lot of the students that are protesting are graduating. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of students that are literally having their degrees taken from them right at the very end because they're part of these protests. But that is a sacrifice they are choosing to make. You know what I mean? I don't agree with the campuses canceling these graduations. I agree with the title of this video being college students deserve to have a graduation. I fully agree that that is something that, like, if you stick it out and do 4 years of school, of grueling school quite often, you deserve to have that moment where you get to hear your voice called out over the loudspeaker and you get to walk up on stage, you get to be handed that piece of paper you've worked your ass off for. I fully agree that that's something that college students deserve to have. Like, as someone who kind of got one, you know, I didn't get to hear my name called, but I got to hear a name that was assigned to me at some point called, and I got to walk up on stage and be handed a useless piece of paper that I have sitting over here, a piece of paper that I worked my ass off for. Well, they're being suspended. That's how they're being prevented from getting those qualifications. They're being suspended for with a variety of things being cited as to why they're being suspended. But that's what a lot of them are being threatened with suspension and then not leaving these encampments because they're there for a purpose. And several of the campuses have said either you need to disperse or you'll be suspended. And they've said, then fucking suspend us, bitch. And so they've suspended them. And a lot of these students are, like I said, seniors. A lot of them are and since we're in May, we're at the end of that school year, which means their graduations would be this week or last week or next week for most of these college campuses, which means that a lot of these students are being suspended right at the very end of their schooling, which is incredibly fucked up.
Literally what they are. These are entitled brats. Now, the news of the first
How are they entitled, Brett? What are they entitled about? What part of their behavior makes them entitled? I would love for her to explain what aspect of this is entitlement that they're acting on.
Was at USC, University of Southern California, where the president announced that they would be canceling their main stage commencement event that usually draws over 65,000 people. It is the primary event of this whole graduation season. And obviously, this crushed students, rightfully so. New York Post wrote USC seniors who didn't have high school graduations due to COVID in tears over canceled ceremony as campus is overrun by anti-Israel protests. I mean, like, no wonder they're in tears. This should not be news. It should not be shocking at all. Like, do you remember the drive-by graduation ceremonies? The literal absurdity that we experienced for 2+ years. Here's an article about that from 2020. Yeah. Students devastated as in-person graduations are canceled. They did not have prom. They didn't have graduation. They couldn't finish their high school careers because of authoritarian politicians. I mean, look at these stupid pictures.
Oh yeah, it's because of the politicians. Yeah, that's why. That's why they couldn't have their graduations. Not because there was a pandemic killing people. That's not the reason. It was because of the authoritarian politicians. Yeah, that's definitely the reason.
By graduations. And some kids didn't even get that. They just had their diploma sent to them in the mail. If you have to do that again this year, you should be...
I can absolutely sympathize with these students, though, because she's not wrong. Like, these are the same kids that didn't get a high school graduation or had their high school graduations fucked in the ass by COVID, and now they're being fucked in the ass again because their campuses are too childish to, you know, do what's being asked of them. Very politely, I should add. They're being asked very politely. They could be a lot more violent with the way that they're protesting, and they aren't being violent. So, yeah.
Setting those diplomas with stamps.com. Now, 2024 has already been fully sensible to just go to stamps.com video right after the news broke, basically speaking on behalf of students everywhere, which is likely why it garnered over 4 million views. Just watch.
So USC just canceled our graduation. I have no words. Like, this is so, like, it's actually comical at this point. If you don't know, the seniors that are graduating college right now are the seniors that graduated in 2020, where we didn't have a high school graduation. and a lot of us had like drive-through fake graduations or no graduation at all. Like, what now?
It's completely wrong.
What now? They sent out an email 10 minutes ago about how they know it's disappointing, but they're canceling it, and they're going to have other fun events, which I don't even know what that means.
Also, I don't understand the logic behind canceling these graduations. Like, what do they think is going to happen? Like, do they think, like, what do they think is going to happen? Like, because so far the protesters haven't been violent, overarchingly. Like, the majority haven't been. The protesters themselves have not been the ones doing the violence 99% of the time. So I don't understand the logic behind canceling the graduation. Like, is it like a safety issue? Like, hire some extra police officers. You seem to be able to invite them in to arrest your students. So why can't you invite them in to protect the graduation if that's what you're concerned about? Yeah, but it's creating a bad reputation, taking this graduation away from these kids, the same ones who didn't get to graduate high school in a normal way, is just going to make their reputations worse, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, you pay all of that money to USC. I don't know if you know how expensive USC is, but it is a very costly school. And you mean to tell me that you can't...
All schools are costly. I'm sure USC is more costly, but they're all incredibly fucking expensive.
...come up with some way to keep this event for these students, specifically for this graduating class. Like, maybe control the people that are destroying your school's property and beating up cops on campus. Crazy concept, I know.
Can you imagine that?
I don't even know why I brought that up, guys. That's never gonna happen. But I mean, like, ever since COVID, I don't think people see these cancellations as a big deal. It's like, oh, well, we had to do it then. It's fine. They'll get over it. It's fine. We'll just cancel everything. We'll send them all home. Like, it's easier just to cancel it or send kids home, make them do hybrid classes, than to take 2 seconds to think critically, come up with a solution to the problems that they're facing. Like, this is lazy, enabling behavior. And by...
I hate to agree with Brett Cooper, but I have to agree with Brett Cooper. I hate to agree, but I do. I agree. She's right. These campuses are just taking the easy way out of just canceling the graduation instead of doing anything else, literally anything else, to accommodate these students.
Doing all of this, they are handing a win to these violent activists. They're saying, yeah, you win. We can't control you.
And we're back to disagreeing with Brett Cooper. But...
we can't do the graduate. You win. That's completely wrong. But maybe that's what they want, because it is the higher education system. Somebody commented on that girl's video and says, your high tuition includes you graduating on stage. If not now, it can be a future date. Do not let them do this to you. You have worked so hard, and this is owed to all of you. Completely agree. I mean, I agree. I don't know as much about the USC one specifically. I've not seen anything in particular about vandalism being done by the pro-Palestinian protests. I've not been keeping track on every single individual one of them. It's kind of difficult to, especially with how skewed the media talks about it. But it includes it doesn't include it. It's not like on the list, but it's like tuition is so expensive at all of these schools that it essentially feels like it should include it. It's not actually like listed in the itinerary when you drop your tuition bill, but tuition is so expensive that it virtually does include it. Couldn't even just postpone it until a later date if they were so concerned. Like, these students worked so hard. They paid so much money. I cannot emphasize that more. And this is the one day that they get to celebrate and be recognized for all of their work for the last 16 years of their lives. It is unfair, it is stupid, and it is completely avoidable, which is probably the most infuriating part of this entire situation. And it is true that USC is still going to host smaller satellite graduations for the individual departments, which I'm very happy about, and I'm glad that those students will get that. But it's not the same, and it's also the principle of the thing. Like, this should not be happening in the first place. Another person commented and said, graduation is such an important moment in people's lives, not only because of what you have achieved, but also because it is a symbol of your hard work. I didn't even realize how much a graduation meant, and then goes on to say until she had graduated herself. And I completely agree. I mean, even if you skipped yours, which I know a lot of people do, even if you didn't care, the principle of why this is being canceled is just absurd and reprehensible. And it's not just USC. I also saw this video from a student at the University of Minnesota.
Here it is. All the professors, when I went to go pick up my stuff, they were all really bummed. They said that they didn't even get a choice. The university just canceled it without asking them. They didn't even get any say. They found out the same time that the students found out, which is really sad to me.
I mean, she didn't even get a satellite graduation or anything like that. She walked over to the administration office. If you were a college student, you know Everybody hates doing that. You never want to have to go to the administration department. That's the worst place on a college campus. And that was her graduation. I mean, like, I remember being sent my diploma in the mail like 2 months after I had technically finished, you know, sent in my last final. It was the most,
They always send you it in the mail, to be fair. Like, the fact that she got to go pick it up in an office on campus is abnormal. Like, I got mine in the mail. That's just how they send them to you. Because they rarely have, especially when you go to a college like a public school, like where they've got so many students. Like, it's very, from what I've heard, it's pretty rare that they even have it the actual fit. Like, the one they hand you on stage isn't actually usually the one with your name on it. It's a lot of times just like a blank one. It's just like a standard "you graduated" type one that they hand you in the little foldable thing. Oh, it's not sitting over there. Weird. In the little like foldable display thing on stage. I guess some maybe do have the right ones printed out, but from at mine and at my friend's ones, which was a different school, it wasn't the one with your name on it. They just sent it to you in the mail after.
it was so sad. I was like, okay, I guess I did it. I'll move on now. I've left it in the past, but it is a bummer because you worked so hard leading up to this amazing event, this amazing time in your life where you're being sent off into the world. And then they do this. And again, like I keep saying.
Yeah, we also have to pay separately for the graduation things. Like, you have to buy the cap and gown. You have to buy any of the tassels. Well, not all the tassels. I think some of the tassels you had to pay for, depending on if you even earned any tassels or not. But you had to buy the cap and gown. They weren't just part of the tuition, which I think is fucking dumb. But yeah.
It's completely avoidable. But of course, avoiding this would require that universities not cater to woke babies for once, and that was never going to happen, so I don't even know why I am surprised. But even though this did make me shockingly angry and emotional, like seriously me crying in the middle of a graduation, there is a positive here. Because if we're being honest, it is not the end of the world. Graduations are meaningful. They are important, obviously, because I'm very emotional about this right now. I wish I had had mine, but this does not determine your future at all. Somebody commented and said, yes, it is very disappointing for you and your classmates.
Like, I got my graduation, and I barely remember it. Like, you saw me sit here. I can't even remember who came. I can't remember. I only know what time of year it was because they only happened in May, really. Like, I don't remember what week it was. I don't remember the date. I don't remember, like... I vaguely remember the vibes, you know what I mean? Like, it was warm-ish out. It was a little breezy. Like, I really don't remember mine very well. Like, if they hadn't dead named me at my graduation, I probably wouldn't have any memories of my graduation. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember the disappointment I felt at my graduation. That's really all I remember about it. So... it only means so much. Like, it's more about the principle of the thing, in my opinion, than it is about the actual, like, experience of it.
Mates, now go out into the world and make many fantastic lives for yourselves. Life isn't always fair, but start your life and make a difference. And I completely agree. To the class of 2024, if any of you guys are listening, you have been dealt some absolutely unreasonable cards as a consequence of entitled politicians, scientists, and now these ridiculous activists, and I am incredibly sorry for that. I wish I could wave a wand and change it. You truly...
I'm not sorry about it for the reason that she is. I'm sorry. I feel bad for the kids who graduated high school in 2020 and now are finishing school in the year 2024. Like, that is so unfortunate for so many reasons. Like, that is just a bad luck of the draw there, especially for being graduating class 2020. That sucks, but someone had to do it, unfortunately, and that was just the year you were dealt. For all of us who had to do schooling during those years, whether we were graduating or not during those years, like, everyone who was in school during that time period just had it extra hard compared to those who weren't in school at that time. And it sucks, and I hate it. I hate it for them. I hate it for them now. I think it's fucking stupid that these campuses are canceling their graduations. Not for the reason she thinks it's dumb, but we do both agree that the campuses are just taking the easy way out by canceling graduation. And I think it sucks ass. And I hate it. It's annoying. I don't remember much, but I think it was just the feeling that I was basically ignored and that they didn't care. Yeah. Alrighty, Jimmy, what next? That was a pretty simple one. We got through that one fairly quickly for us. I feel like that one went by pretty quick. I really thought I was going to drop that. I really did. Getting it in the mail after working from home in the final months, so didn't really get to say goodbye to everyone. They just basically thinking I'm never going to get a graduation to finally say I finished. Yeah, it definitely makes it harder to bookend stuff, not having that like official moment, you know? Oh, you want the Velma one? All right.
Velma,
this is about season 1 of, there is a season 2, if you didn't know. There is a season 2, which I only know about because I currently pay for HBO Max. But this video is about the first season.
HBO Max cartoon series might possibly be the
No, this is from a year ago. I haven't seen anything about the new one. I can see if there's anything about Velma season 2. Okay, there are videos about season 2. Oh boy. Oh god. I don't even want to know.
My name is Velma Dinkley, and I caught my first...
Oh my god. It's only got 2.6 likes. 2.6k likes. Oh, okay.
serial killer. Did the experience change me? Yes. Being popular doesn't suck. Unfortunately, it has taught me nothing about teen romance.
You told Norval you loved him.
Do you really want to have a deep conversation about our feelings right now?
Yes.
Fine. Punch it, Fred.
You killed me, Norval.
My guilt is causing me to hallucinate!
Marijuana will cure them. Zero side effects.
Oh, God.
The serial killer is targeting men!
If I don't solve this murder, who will?
Fred Jones, Spooky Stuff Hunter, is here. Yeah, I'm still doing that.
Whatever's brewing is even bigger than last time.
When you find someone you care about, lock them down ASAP.
I know, I can't tell. There's no plot here so far. There's none. There's no plot. None.
This is official police business. So if we catch any of you investigating, you'll be in cuffs faster than a startup founder with a weird voice.
It looks so boring. The only pro is that they left the comment section open. I didn't even realize this released. Good job, internet, for not blowing this up. The only way to fix this show is that it becomes self-aware. It's no secret this show is only relevant because it is hated. And the only interesting thing about it is how the show reacts to the fan backlash. Yeah. This is the 9/11 of Scooby-Doo history. That's funny. I had more fun reading those few comments than I did watching the trailer. I'm so uninterested that like even watching a video about it, I have no interest in. Like at least with season 1, I was I watched basically all the videos that came out about season 1. I have the vote visible. It's 2.6 to 2.24K dislikes. How are you able to see the dislikes? Right? I'm also not, I mean, this is on the VOD account, so it's not going to recommend normal people to me that I would watch people make reactions to it for, or make reviews about it for. I'm not even seeing any of the big ones that I would watch normally respond or make reviews on it. So I'll just delete this. This is about season 1 though. This is about season 1. I do want to watch X-Men 97, which is why we're not going to watch this video. I still want to watch the show itself, which is on... Which platform is it on? Oh, it's on Disney Plus. Ah. Which I don't have access to anymore. Lovely. All right, what are we gonna actually watch then, since we don't want to watch that shit, huh? Modern media. Which one was that? Was that one of these ones down here that I scrolled? This one? The strong female characters one? The one with Abby in the thumbnail?
What's up, everybody? It's Endymion, and in my last video I talked about how media these days...
Okay, so I selected this one because it's got strong female characters in the title. How it ruins female... So obviously, it's gonna be, oh, woke trash conversation. Plus, it's got Abby in the thumbnail, who is a very, very, very well-written strong female character. Which means it's gonna be good. Which means we're gonna have a lot to talk about.
Treats male characters unfairly. So I figured... What's up, everybody? It's Endymion, and in my last video I talked about how media these days treats male characters unfairly. So I figured why not get even spicier and talk about...
Where's that video? Where's the treats men unfairly video? Because that could be interesting too. Because I want to know which men he's talking about. Because there are certainly ones that treat men poorly. Absolutely. It's definitely something that happens. I'll scroll through his thing while we watch.
About the other side this time around. But before I begin, if you like the video, consider subscribing and sharing it to give my life meaning, and hit the bell to be notified of future uploads. And now let's begin diving into the cesspool and ask the question: why does everyone seem to hate female characters these days? I know, right
misogyny.
Off the bat, you're probably thinking this will be some pro-man, anti-woman video, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Please try to watch till the end until you decide to crucify me, cause I promise you this video is not going where you think it is. While very clearly
he talks too slow, I gotta speed this shit up. Hold on.
And myself, I do love me some female characters in my entertainment, but like anything, it all depends on how they're written. Largely speaking, these days it seems you could throw a rock and hit multiple landmines across the internet when it comes to topics like these. From the Marvel Cinematic Universe to video games and television, it seems like there's a war brewing between the creators of entertainment and their audiences. So what gives? Why does the internet go berserk almost every time it involves a female character these days? Well, I think it's a combination of things, starting with what I've said in previous videos. And that's that modern creators seem to be unable in writing strong female characters without alienating or talking down to their audiences. Movies like the new Star Wars trilogy, for example, are prime examples of female empowerment aplenty, but it's done at the expense of...
I will give him Rey. I'll give him Rey. She's a Mary Sue. She is. She is definition, textbook Mary Sue. I like the first movie in the newer Star Wars trilogy. I love The Force Awakens. It makes me very happy. I quite like that film. It means a lot to me. I bought the DVD for it when it came out all those years ago. The 2 movies after it, though, kind of poo-poo, to be honest. They're not very well written. They're not as bad as people make them out to be. In hindsight, when you look back on them, they're not as terrible as people say they are, but they're not good. And the writing for the strong female lead is definitely not great. So I'll give him that. I'll give him the Star Wars trilogy. I'll give him that.
The male demographic. Characters like Rey are amazing at everything, never needing saving or really anyone's help ever. Contrast that with the
She does have flaws, but they're not flaws that they're not written correctly. Like, she does have flaws, but they're not written as flaws, if that makes sense. Like, they're not written as something that she needs to improve upon or something that she needs to overcome, if that makes any sense. So they're not really presented as flaws, even though that's what they are, if that makes sense.
Previous hero of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, and they couldn't be more different. Luke stumbles constantly.
Ooh, he's got a video about the woke culture in Spider-Man 2. We'll add that to the list.
He fails and needs to be bailed out by his friends in many scenarios, and yet people love Luke and despise Rey. But why? I think this comes down to one important reason, which is that female characters these days, Western made specifically may I add, are often written as emotionless superheroes who are capable of doing everything themselves.
Nope, not him showing Aloy. Not him showing Aloy after saying... Not him showing Aloy after saying that. That's so funny.
Important reason, which is that female characters these days, Western made specifically may I add, are often written as emotionless superheroes who are capable of doing everything.
I don't know what this game is, so I don't know.
Themselves. To put it
capable of doing everything themselves, cuts to Aloy, whose entire storyline in Forbidden West is her learning she can't do it all on her own. That's her main character development in Forbidden West. Is learning to accept help from her friends. That's the whole character arc of the second game.
Simply, the reason why so many female characters these days are hated is because they're not written to be relatable or even human at times. That's not to say there aren't any good feminine characters these days, of course. In terms
it's
of
just so funny to me.
Western-made media where this problem prominently persists, I would argue that characters like Black Widow or Gamora are pretty great. I mean, they're badass, empowering, and very loved by fans. But I think that's because those female characters actually have flaws in stories that resonate with audiences.
It's because they're people. I'll give him 1 point on that. A lot of times, strong female characters are not written as people. They're written as strong female characters and not as like women who are strong. Like, they're not written as people a lot of the times. They're written as a token and not as a person. And none of the ones he's really shown so far fall into that category, except maybe Rey. Like, but even then, she's very much still a person. Even though she's a Mary Sue, she's still written as a person, in my opinion. Now, I got that her specifically could be debatable. I don't know the one that he keeps showing. I don't know what that one is, so I can't speak on that one. But so far, most of the ones he's shown are not written as not people, but
Natasha
they had the time to develop before the MCU got lazy. Yes.
is an assassin looking to redeem herself, and Gamora is a deadly living weapon forged by the hands of the Mad Titan Thanos. Those are cool ideas and people love them because they're powerful, but they're also incredibly flawed and emotional too. On the other hand, of course, when I say people hate female
Where's the transcripts? They usually have transcripts. No transcript for me? It's fine, I'll just go back.
To put it simply, the reason
written as emotionless
superheroes who are capable of doing
everything by themselves.
everything themselves. To put it simply, which is fine. This very rigid and alienating way of writing characters has permeated and
Did I skip too far ahead?
Which is fine, but the writing and emotional too. On the other hand, of course, when I say people hate female, they're also incredibly flawed and emotional too. On the other hand, of course, when I say people hate female characters these days, this usually brings two examples to everyone's minds. One is Rey, and the other is Captain Marvel. Characters like Captain Marvel are pretty much everything that's wrong with modern writing these days.
They don't hate Captain Marvel. They hate Brie Larson. I feel like that's forgotten a lot, that a lot of the outrage about Captain Marvel was actually people being mad about something Brie Larson said, the actress, and not the character of Captain Marvel. I do have to say that the first Captain Marvel movie is one of the weaker entries in the MCU, but not because she's written poorly. I tried to rewatch the movie a few times, and one of the times I literally fell asleep during it, which is not something I generally struggle with, falling asleep during movies. I was just bored. And then another time I just tapped out in the middle because I was bored. I don't think it's because she's written poorly. They obviously give Captain Marvel a lot of shit because she's very emotionless throughout it. And I do think the whole, I do think that plot line that they like to that is brought up in the movie about it being oh, you can't get emotional, blah blah blah. I do think it's very ham-fisted, but Brie isn't playing it poorly. She's doing a good job of acting it, in my opinion. A lot of people say that her acting in that movie is bad. I disagree with that. I don't think it's the best acting in the world or anything, but I don't think it's garbage like people were calling it. I don't think the issue with Captain Marvel is that she was written badly. I think the issue is just the movie overall was written poorly. I think the pacing needed work, and I think the plot itself needed a bit more spicing up, if that makes sense.
Marvel is written to be insanely powerful and indestructible,
which is how it is in the comics as well. Captain Marvel is always insanely powerful and indestructible. That is how their powers work in the comics. If I remember correctly, from what I've seen other people who've read the comics say, that is not an inaccurate depiction of the character from the comics. It's just this version of Captain Marvel is a woman. I know in the comics there are female and male versions, I believe, in the comics as well. But this is how they're always written. They always are insanely powerful and nearly indestructible, if not indestructible. So that's not an inaccurate depiction.
Is fine, but the writers forgot to give her any flaws, which means no one can really relate to her. This very rigid and alienating way of writing characters has permeated and infested every form of modern entertainment. And wherever these emotionless, robotic female characters exist, there's always weak and pathetic men that are used as punching bags to uplift these awfully written stereotypes. Again, it's not
them
all
showing him as a weak and pathetic man. That's just not... Finn is not a weak or pathetic man. Why are... Finn is actually a pretty well-written character, in my opinion. not the best, of course. He still falls into he's still in those movies, and those movies just aren't very well written. But he's not written as weak or pathetic.
Bad, and I would argue that there are tons of great female characters in entertainment these days too. For example, Polygon recently said From Software basically hates women and doesn't know how to write them, which I did a whole video on already, and spoiler alert, I disagree with Polygon. I think From Software writes their female characters as flawed and realistic individuals, which is why I think the majority of players out there love characters like Millennia or Frida. They're badass, sure, but they're flawed as hell. Maybe a controversial pick, but I also like the new Lara Croft for the most part too. I found her journey in that first game especially to be really entertaining, and I liked how she starts off as an understandably scared and lost person, but eventually rises to action and becomes the Tomb Raider. Another female character I love is 2B from Nier Automata. She's this incredibly badass android who feels lost amidst a war, and her revelations and trauma feel real and relatable, which is impressive considering she's not even a human. I also love the badass female heroines from the Resident Evil franchise. Characters like Jill Valentine are awesome. I love how she fearlessly fights despite the odds and does it with an almost sarcastic demeanor. Although most of the examples I gave were from Asian-made media, Lara is of course from a Western studio. But the problem here seems to lie almost completely with Westernized characters. There's an almost bitterness, as if these female characters are written this way as some deluded act of revenge. And what may seem cathartic or empowering to the people who make it comes off as delusional and annoying to the general audience. These creators love talking down to people. They seem to revel in some self-diagnosed sense of righteousness, and they borderline demand that everyone acknowledge and agree with them. And when you don't,
he's not entirely wrong. Aloy absolutely talks down to people. Not every person, but there are absolutely people she talks down to. Especially like, she doesn't really talk to the Nora in Forbidden West, but when she really talks down to Varl a lot, especially at the beginning of the game, and not really talks. I guess talks down isn't really the right word there when talking to Varl, but she does absolutely talk down to people in the game, because she does often know more. But there's a story reason why she talks down to them. It's not because she's high and mighty and written as a strong female character. Aloy specifically talks down to people because she does know more than them. Like, but I love them using an example where it's actually like story based why the character behaves that way. Like it makes sense why the character behaves that way. It's not, and she also doesn't knock down everybody. For example, Alva, like once she gives Alva the upgrade so that her focus can see everything that Aloy can, she stops talking down to Alva. Like, she definitely keeps things from Alva that she doesn't think Alva will understand, but she doesn't talk down to her anymore, because Alva is a very intelligent character. She's very advanced compared to a lot of the people that Aloy does talk to, because a lot of them are very, like, they don't really interact with the world in the way Aloy does, so they don't have the information that Aloy does, so she does talk down to them. She is arrogant in that aspect, and she gets her ass beat for it a few times, and it's written kind of as a flaw, but it's also kind of endearing because we understand it from the same level that she does, if that makes sense. because she has all of this extra knowledge. Like, she really gets on like the Nora and Varl and stuff when they talk about the mountain, like especially in the first game. Like, she does it a lot in the first game as well, especially when talking to the Nora about things, because they see this technology as a god, and they see Aloy as this superior being after she comes back out of the mountain, and she hates that shit. She thinks it's dumb as hell and hates it. So she talks down to these people because she has to, because there's no way she could explain it to them in a way that they would understand because of their culture and stuff. And so I think it's funny that they use this. Like, there are definitely female characters that do that where it's not justified, but he uses Aloy because people love to hate on Aloy for some reason.
You're called every name in the book. And while I do acknowledge that there are those out there who simply hate women, the vast majority of people are not like that. We're just sick of being talked down to and told to accept something that doesn't resonate with us. I mean, it's not all bad, since we do have heroines like Lara from Tomb Raider or Ellie from The Last of Us, who I really love as a character. I think Ellie is a great example of being both a great female character and a solid form of gay representation without feeling ridiculous. But this is because Ellie is a fully fleshed out character with actual emotions, regrets, and flaws. But of course, you'll have people who also say characters like Abby from Part 2 are awful because they're women, and I don't agree with that either. Actually, I think Abby is a pretty solid character, which may piss off many, but I think
I love him putting her in the thumbnail then.
Her character arc is good, and she has the best moments in the game, in my opinion. And I know that'll piss off a certain group of people with me saying it, but guys, I have to be honest. I don't think Abby is a bad character. In fact, she's my preferred character to play in Part 2. But maybe I'll leave my thoughts on that game for a future video. But then again, we're talking about Naughty Dog right now, and those psychos have always been great at writing characters. I love Elena and Chloe from Uncharted, for example. They're women, and yet I can relate and love them even though I'm not. But for every Naughty Dog, we have the opposite. And I want to now look at how a certain game publisher doesn't really seem to practice what they preach, which leads me to my next example, the more recent Assassin's Creed games. Starting off, I think Aya from Origins is amazing, but in the 2 sequel games you have Cassandra, who is considered the canon choice over her brother Alexios in Odyssey. Yet in the reveal trailer, it's very clearly shown that Alexios is the main character of Odyssey over Cassandra, or at least that's how Ubisoft sells it. And when you look at the cover art of the game, it even features Alexios, yet Ubisoft has confirmed that Cassandra is the canon choice. So if she is, why isn't she on the cover of the game? Why wasn't she the canon choice in the reveal trailer? But it gets even more bizarre because Ubisoft does it again with the next game, Valhalla. In that reveal trailer, it's shown that male Ivor is the canon choice, with him being featured in the reveal trailer. Male Ivor is also on the cover of the game, yet just like Cassandra, female Ivor is apparently the canon choice according to Ubisoft. So if the female choices are the true heroes of both Odyssey and Valhalla, why is Ubisoft afraid of showcasing their female heroes in marketing and cover art? The answer would be that when it comes to marketing games, the majority of players, whether you like to admit it or not, are mostly men. And it's been proven that games sell more when they feature male characters in the promotional material. I mean, just look at any Call of Duty ever. They basically always feature a man on the cover. But this just proves that studios like Ubisoft, for example, are trying to play both sides of the audience and are not willing to actually back up what they say when they push for female-centric games, yet completely remove all mention of them when it comes to promotional exposure. If women are so important when it comes to representation, then Ubisoft dropped the ball massively when it comes to Assassin's Creed in recent years.
See, I love him making this. It got you to save the video. It did. I'll give him that. I love him saying this though, because like him mentioning the marketing as if anytime any game is ever marketed as a female lead, they don't get a bunch of shit for it. Like, I don't agree with hiding it, obviously. I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he's correct, because I don't know anything about the fucking Assassin's Creed games. So I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt just so I can make commentary about it. So I don't agree with hiding it in their marketing if that's what they actually did. But I also can't entirely blame them because, like I said, any game that really puts women in the forefront, especially a established universe like Assassin's Creed, they get a lot of shit for it. They get a lot of like additional scrutiny about it. So I can't entirely blame them for hiding it either. So it's interesting that he would mention marketing for that.
But that's just my opinion. Of course, let me know what you think about that. I'm just someone who believes you should practice what you preach, and that doesn't really seem to be what's happening. It feels more like female characters are being used as propaganda pieces by companies in order to artificially gain goodwill. But I think if you truly believe in your characters, you let them shine, not hide them or use them as progressive virtual pats on the back. A really good example of this would actually be Activision Blizzard and the recent release of Overwatch 2, which features 3 new female heroes on the cover of their game, and yet the actual company behind the game is full of sexual harassment lawsuits and bizarre scenarios where female employees are being attacked.
Sadly, that's often true for most companies, so...
Maybe I'm just crazy, but it just doesn't feel genuine, you know? As you can probably tell, I'm not really someone who identifies with...
It rarely is genuine.
The hate all women crowd these days. But I also don't agree with the women are better than men camp either. I think there's a middle ground here where we can all rationally discuss these things without wanting to rip each other's throats out. And I believe that if modern creators stopped attacking their fans and belittling them or using women as scapegoats, we'd be in a much more healthy place than we are right now. But there is great female writing out there too with this next example, and that character is Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones is the antithesis of what most writers do these days when it comes to how they write their female heroes. What I love about Jessica is she's not portrayed as a savant or better than anyone else. She's shown to be a human being first, and that's why so many fans love her. I would argue that Jessica Jones is...
Yeah, Jessica Jones is one of the most human characters I think I've ever watched on television. She's an incredibly flawed person. And I think that's something that's important. Like, there are obviously stories that are led by women. The fact that they are a woman will affect the story. There's not really a way to write a character who is a woman without that coming into play in some way, shape, or form, just because of how women exist in the world and how much being a woman affects how you walk through the world. It'd be really hard to not include that. But if that's not like the primary focus of the story, like a story like Promising Young Woman, for example, where like the main conflict of the story is her wrestling with like sexual assault that occurred in her past. So like that is the point of the movie, is that's like an important aspect of the movie, is her being a woman and how she engages with the world around her in relation to that trauma. So you can't avoid it in that story. Like if it's not a story based around it, like Jessica's isn't, for example, like her being a woman obviously is important, but it's not really like feminism isn't the point of her story, if that makes sense. Women empowerment or whatever isn't like the point of her story. So she's written, like, you could make her a man, like you could do it, you could gender swap the whole thing, and it wouldn't really affect the story all that much, if that makes sense. Like obviously she wouldn't be Jessica Jones anymore, but like if you could make Kilgrave a woman and her a man, and it wouldn't really affect the story all that much, if that makes sense. And I think that's a good litmus test in a lot of situations, to determine if for writers especially, because a lot of times I feel like that's a trap a lot of writers can fall into, is inadvertently writing misogyny, or writing from a misogynistic standpoint, I should say, because we live in a world where men are put at the forefront, where men are kind of the like starting line in a lot of our brains, even if we don't realize it. Like white men are a lot of times where we start from in our heads, even if we don't mean to. And so that's a good litmus test, I think, for when you're writing a character. If you can gender swap your whole story and it still work and still make sense, if that's not against the point that you're trying to make, of course, like that's something that could work in The Last of Us as well. Like you could gender swap all of those characters and it worked just as well. Because again, that's not the purpose of the story. The purpose of the story isn't, oh, they are women. It just, the leads happen to be women. You know what I mean? Am I making sense? I feel like I'm just rambling, but...
actually a really solid character and what modern creators should look to as inspiration when writing new heroes. While Jessica is strong in a physical sense, I mean she literally has super strength, the writers smartly instead focus on how fractured and broken of a person Jessica is, and this is where she's at her most interesting. Just because your character is a woman and is also strong doesn't mean they can't be relatable. And that's why Jessica Jones works so well. She's incredibly flawed and broken, but moves forward regardless of her pain because she wants to make the world a better place. On the flip side, I want to look at a video game character that I don't really think works that well, and that's...
What was the other woke bit in Spider-Man 2 people were having a problem with? There was the MJ storyline where they felt like she was like bossing Peter around or something. And then wasn't there some queer shit in it? Oh. Miles's love interest being deaf, I think. No, not the movie, the game.
Aloy from the Horizon games. Look, I've platinumed both Horizon make the world a better place. On the flip side, I want to look at a video game character that I don't really think works that well, and that's Aloy.
Okay, here we go. Here we go.
Horizon games. Look, I've platinumed both Horizons, and I'm still not convinced that Aloy is a PlayStation icon, as Sony likes to call her. It's not that I'm intimidated or jealous of Aloy's physical or technical prowess, but
also, the clips he's using here, like, I don't really want a live action movie or show for Horizon. Like, I'm gonna watch it, but I don't really need it, if that makes sense. But I kind of wish they weren't making it live action. I kind of wish they were doing like an animated one. I wish they would do like what they did for this trailer, where it's like animated, because I just think it looks cooler than they can make it. Because I mean, all of the machines are going to be virtually created anyways, so like, you know, might as well just have her also be virtually created. Because this trailer was really well made. And really nice to look at. So,
but that she reminds me a lot of Rey from Star Wars. She's very stoic, very strong, and completely devoid of basic human emotions like 90% of the time. I get it.
I disagree. I don't think she's completely devoid of emotions. I just think she's not a very emotional person, which happens. Like that's a thing that happens. Like, I think she's emotionally stunted, definitely, but that's mostly due to the fact that she was raised alone. Like, the only person she interacted with growing up on a regular basis was Rost, you know? So she's a bit emotionally stunted because she wasn't socialized like a person growing up. I just would say she's not very emotional. Like, I would just say she's very reserved. She's very much a bottler. She very much bottles things up. Like, I think she should have had a more emotional response and should have had more emotional moments in response to Varl's death, but she absolutely did have emotional moments in relation to it. I just don't think I think she could have had more, but I don't disagree with how they wrote her in those situations. Like, I think it's very in character for her to very much shut down and not talk about that stuff and keep it inside and bottle it up. We see her emotions about it when we are alone in her room and we're looking at her stuff about Varl and we get the voice lines and stuff about it. And it's not uncommon for people to just not express their emotions outwardly, especially when they have a childhood like she had, a very fucked up one. So definitely interesting. And yeah, of course she's a little bit of a Mary Sue. She's a lead character in a video game where the whole fucking point of the video game is you win the fight. Like, that's the whole point of the video game, is you win the fight. You know what I mean? Like, that's hard to avoid in an open world game, in my opinion, for any character, for them not to end up kind of Mary Sue-ish. And even then, she still gets her ass beat fairly regularly by the Zeniths. Like, she loses to the Zeniths several times throughout the game. And that's part of her learning and part of her growth, is that she has to understand she can't go against those people by herself. to the point that in Burning Shores, she asks Seika to come back and join her, despite the fact Seika's part of the mission is over, because she knows she's going to need help during the final battle, since she doesn't know what's coming at her, and she knows she's going to need backup. Like, that's part of the point. Like, but I hate the critique of like, oh, well, she wins all of her fights. It's like, yeah, because we're playing as her. Is Spider-Man also a Mary Sue for that reason? Like, he also wins most of his fights when we play as him, because we play as him. Like, that's part of being a lead character in a video game, generally speaking. Like, I obviously go back to The Last of Us a lot right now because it's just on my brain, but I feel like The Last of Us isn't... Like, The Last of Us is just so well written. Like, it's a story-based game. Like, the action in the game, we kill a fuck ton of people, but our characters are losing. Like, The Last of Us 2 especially, like, it's made in such a way that even when you're winning the fight, you're losing the fight, and that's very unique to that game. Like, that's not something you see a lot in a lot of open world games, or because it's not an open world game, but it's not something you see a lot in a lot of video games anyways, because of how that story is structured. The Last of Us 2 is a very unique video game in every aspect, but I feel like it's a bad example to bring into this conversation because it breaks all of the rules and therefore sets the bar in a lot of cases, in my opinion. Whereas a game like Horizon is not I'm not diminishing Horizon at all. You know, I love these games, is more standard for what you're going to see in a video game storyline. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, I disagree about, I disagree that the emotions thing is a bad thing. The emotions thing is in character.
Has the world on her shoulders and all that, but Aloy is a very robust... robotic character to me, which is ironic since she's in a game full of, well, machine dinosaurs. And of course she does show compassion and anger sometimes, but she comes across as a Jesus-like figure to me. It weirds me out how everyone calls her savior too. Like, I get it, she saved the day in the original game, but
yeah, it weirds her out too, bro. She hates it when people call her that. Like, she hates that shit too. What do you mean? She also hates it. But that's also the culture in this world. Like, you are defined by your successes in this world, more so than in our world. Like, the titles you earn are a big fucking deal in the Horizon world. Like, that's why they all call her the savior of Meridian, because she did. She saved the world. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big fucking deal. Like, that's why they all call her by one of her many, many titles, because titles in the world of Horizon are a big deal. Like, if you are important enough to have a title, let alone a fuck ton like Aloy does, that's a big deal. And Aloy, very much, every time people call her something that's not her name, not every time, but pretty much if it was every time, she'd never stop groaning. But basically every time someone calls her the savior, or calls her, you know, one of these titles that she's earned, it's like, she hates that shit. So I think it's funny that he also doesn't like it, because Aloy doesn't, and very much expresses that every time it happens.
It gives this messiah complex to Aloy that doesn't make her relatable or interesting, in my opinion. And it feels weird, and while I can connect to characters like Lara Croft or Jessica Jones or even Ellie or Abby to some capacity, but when it comes to Aloy, I can't. She's so bland. She's a lot like Rey and Captain Marvel for me, and represents a lot of the reasons why people don't like these specific kind of female characters these days. Another character that's somewhat annoyed...
Ironically, I feel like that's a fairly common complaint that I've seen about Aloy pretty often.
To me, was the main character of Star Wars Battlefront 2, Iden Versio. She's another example of a
skip ahead because I don't know anything about
that exemplifies sides and believes she's morally right all of a sudden, just makes her not only a boring character, but a stupid one too. Aloy and Iden are cut from the same cloth. They're female characters written to be unstoppable death machines that are somehow supposed to be role models for women. But ultimately, they're just shallow and uninteresting, and they lack any real flaws or emotion. When the robotic dinosaurs and the faceless stormtroopers have more personality than your heroes, you know you've screwed up. But I think the core reason of this is due to the message these sorts of super all-powerful female characters send to women, which is that if you are emotional, sincere, or vulnerable in any way, then that means you are not strong or in control. Basically, what modern writers are saying to the women out there is that the less you are—
Except that's not at all what Horizon says about Aloy's behavior. If anything, it frames it as a bad thing. But okay.
like a woman, the better, which is super weird to me. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I think of some of the strongest women in my life, I often think of my mom or sister. They're both extremely feminine people. They enjoy getting their nails done, wearing jewelry and makeup, and they're strong because they embrace who they are as women, strengths, flaws, and all. Just because my mom—
But the thing is, Aloy could be a dude, and it wouldn't impact her story. Like, if Aloy was a dude, and the person she was cloned was a dude, it literally wouldn't change the story at all. Like, not even a little bit. So, and I guarantee you, if she was a dude, they wouldn't get the critiques about her being emotionless or a Mary Sue. Like, I 100% guarantee if she was a dude, those would not be complaints that we'd be hearing. But whatever.
Mom and sister are feminine doesn't make them weak. Just because they have emotions and are vulnerable at times doesn't
I feel like
mean
he's
they're
still
pathetic.
talking too slowly.
Making a female character be devoid of emotion, romantic feelings, or any flaws doesn't make them strong. It makes them unrelatable and really boring. I mean, look at the first Wonder Woman movie. In that film, Diana Prince
Love that movie.
is insanely badass and strong. Yet she's also portrayed as loving, emotional, and at times vulnerable. These characteristics don't make Wonder Woman
Was my favorite movie for a while.
but allow audiences to resonate and relate to her, which is great. Aloy is Wonder Woman if you removed all the humanity, love, or flaws from her. What you're left with is a
Aloy is nothing like Wonder Woman, but okay.
killing machine that has little to no emotional depth. Look, I get that modern creators want their female heroes—
She's definitely a superhero. She's definitely that, especially in this world. She's definitely larger than life. But she's not Wonder Woman. So
to not be damsels
she's
in
absolutely flawed, absolutely needs to be rescued. I mean, literally in like the first few hours of the first game, Rost has to save her because she loses the fight. Like, okay, sure. She's totally Wonder Woman, definitely.
distress, but when the freaking God of War himself has more emotion than your female heroine, that's some terrible characterization. Ironically, this push for toxic female heroes with no emotion—
I know I didn't finish Valhalla, or Ragnarok, not Valhalla, God of War Ragnarok. I will eventually one day, but Kratos doesn't really do emotions all that much these days. At least not in the God of War that I played. So Aloy definitely has more emotion than him. I love that he's platinum both games, but still thinks Aloy is bland and emotionless. Like, I think that's— is it because she's not crying all the time? Like, I want to know why people are labeling her as emotionless. Like, she's certainly not— I would say she's definitely less emotional than a lot of female characters, but not to the point of needing to be labeled emotionless. I would say she's not any more or less emotionless than your average male character, to be honest. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't— and especially since she's still a kid in the first game, because she's like, what, like 17 or something in the first game? 16, 17? And only like 17 or 18 in this game. Like, especially for how young she is, I would say she's a little less emotional than average, but not emotionless. You know what I mean?
Has led to male heroes being more emotional than ever, and it's actually worked really well. Look at Spider-Man or Kratos or Jin Sakai.
Yeah, she's definitely less emotional than Spider-Man, no doubt. I would probably put her on about the same level as Jin in terms of like how much emotion she expresses outwardly. Jin's probably a bit angrier, but I would think I would put them on the same level, I think, for how much emotion they tend to show. Maybe that's what it is. I guess people are just not used to watching female characters not cry all the time. I don't know. Like, like I don't know what the I don't know. I don't know what it is.
They're strong, capable, and badass, but man are they flawed. And it's so aggravating seeing female heroes being portrayed as one-dimensional.
How is Jin more flawed than Aloy? Like, I've only played through Ghost of Tsushima the once, whereas I've played through Horizon twice. I've played through Zero Dawn like I think 3 or 4 times at this point. But how is Jin more flawed than Aloy? Like I don't think either of them are painted as excessively flawed. They both have flaws. No, I'm gonna have to disagree.
And godlike. Look, being a woman is not a bad thing at all, and modern writers seem very scared or uninterested in representing women in a believable or relatable way. And this is how you end up with blunders like Charlie's Angels, which was extremely anti-man to the point that the director Elizabeth Banks regretted how that film was marketed when it released. Because attacking your consumer base doesn't exactly—
It was just a bad movie.
lead to strong financial success, which is insane that these modern creators can't seem to wrap their heads around this almost borderline simple concept. Don't talk down to your audience, then cry and scream when nobody wants to support your product. And if you are doing this, then you deserve to fail, because you're clearly out of touch with what people want these days in entertainment. And when I look at characters like Aloy or Aiden or Rey, never mind not seeing a woman, I don't even see them as human at times. They're just so— I don't know how to put it. It's like an algorithm or an AI wrote them or something. Like a bunch of computers in a room ran some code and devised what would be the most all-powerful and anti-human character they could possibly create. Look, a character doesn't need to be male in order for me to relate to them, as I've said before. But these robotic, emotionless, Terminator-like female heroes are not only impossible to relate to, but they're just boring and bland. And honestly, they feel insulting to women as a whole, because it's like these writers think the only way for women to be strong is to remove all of the unique characteristics and nuances of what makes women incredible in the first place. Like, am I making sense here? Because when I think of some of my favorite female characters, I think of heroes like Storm, Agent 355, Dagger, Morrigan, or Jill Valentine. Characters that are incredibly badass and capable, but each has limits and vulnerabilities that makes them relatable and nuanced. A lot of these modern day female characters are just assholes with robotic demeanors, no interest in love, and zero—
Are women not allowed to be assholes? Is that illegal now? I love it when women are assholes. I think it's great. I love it when women are allowed to be jackasses, because for so long that's been illegal. You know what I mean? Like, that's been like, they're not allowed to be mean or rude or strict, and they're often labeled those things when there's so much as just a little bit of pushback towards what other people want from them. Like, oh, we don't want this character to take her clothes off. Oh, well, she's such a bitch then. Like, that's like the closest they've been allowed to not being rude. So it's nice to actually see these characters genuinely be rude, like when Aloy talks down to people. That is rude of her to do. It's absolutely— even if you understand why she's doing it, that's fucked up, and it's rude and mean. And that's part of her character, because people who are smarter than other people and have more information than other people are often rude and mean about it. You know, like, they often hold that over other people, whether they are meaning to or not. And that's realistic. That's a realistic thing to put as part of her character. Is it often something that happens? Are poorly written female characters often robotic and mean? Yes, I'll give them that. But a lot of these characters that they also want to say are badly written when they aren't, are also written to be mean. So, you know.
They don't feel like they're written for anyone but to simply be giant middle fingers in some deluded crusade. Assholes with robotic demeanors, no interest in love, and zero flaws. They don't feel like they're written—
No interest in love. Why the fuck does that matter? Is it because they're women, so they have to want love? Is that why? Because I never see people complain when men don't have love interests in video games. because I mean that's still pretty rare, but I don't see people complaining when men aren't given love interests in video games. But I always see it as a complaint when women aren't given love interests. Just saying. Just saying. Just saying.
For anyone but to simply be giant middle fingers in some deluded crusade against what these modern creators deem as problematic or sexist or something. So really the reason why people hate female characters these days is because they're written to be anything but what actual women are like. They're impossibly beyond anything any rational woman can ever hope to achieve. That's not to say there isn't physically strong or skilled women in terms of warfare or whatever out there, of course there is. I'm sure some women watching this could kick my ass, and if you can, please DM me because joke's on you, I'm into that. But anyways, presenting today's female role models as emotionless, loveless machines that talk down to and put every man beneath them is just stupid. We need to stop portraying women as perfect and toxic while being oblivious to the red flags they send out to everyone.
That's so contradictory. A woman, you can't be both perfect and toxic. The second one does not allow for the first one. But okay.
Around them. I don't know how anyone can relate to someone like Captain Marvel or Aloy or Rey or Tila from Masters of the Universe.
I relate to Aloy too much sometimes. Like everything from like the things people hate about her, about like how much she talks when you're like trying to solve puzzles and stuff, like how much she talks to herself is something that I've seen a lot of people complain about. I talk to myself all the time. It's a problem. I relate to Aloy too much in that. I'm very independent like Aloy is. And like I'm very stubborn like Aloy is. I'm intelligent sometimes like Aloy is. Like I relate to Aloy on a lot of different facets. I'm not as physically fit or capable. I am not as talented as she is. I'm probably not as intuitive as she is. But that doesn't mean I can't relate to her. Like I don't understand how, like, why,
while being oblivious to the red flags they send out to everyone around them. I don't know how anyone can relate to someone
like I don't understand how, I don't know how anyone can relate to anyone. You can relate to characters without being exactly like them. You know, like that's not what relatability is. It doesn't have to be you on the screen for you to be able to relate to a character. Like I'm sure you, Jimmy, can relate to a lot of the characters, a lot of the female characters that we see on this channel, but you're not a woman. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be the character to relate to a character. Like, that's not how the world works. You know what I mean? Like I relate. I like. I relate a lot to Fitz from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., even though me and him have very little in common. You know what I mean? I relate a lot to a lot of the women in the games that we play, even though I'm not a woman anymore. It's like you don't have to be a carbon copy of the character to relate to the character. So that's another thing I've seen more than just this guy say, that I don't know how you could possibly relate to this character because they're too perfect. It's like, but they still have flaws a lot of the times. Jim and Fitz are basically the same person. I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. She's an outcast. You know, you can comment that in the Twitch chat. It's not illegal. But one of the people in the server I'm in has said anyone who's been treated like an outcast might be able to relate. Yeah. And as a trans person who has lived my life, more of my life as a queer woman than I have as a trans man, absolutely, like 100%. Like that's so relatable, and it's something that isolates Aloy because in her own world, it's something that isolates her because not most of the people in her world haven't had to live that way. And it's something that she starts to relate to Seika about in Burning Shores, because Seika has started to become a bit of an outcast in her tribe because of the actions she's taken to try to help her tribe. That's a big one. Thank you.
Like Captain Marvel or Aloy or Rey or Tila from Masters of the Universe. We need to stop.
I love him showing a clip of her getting frustrated after talking about how motionless she is, but
attacking each other when it comes to these conversations too. I hope you understand that I'm not saying women can't be badass or strong, but the way things are going, it seems like young women
I do appreciate him clickbaiting us with Abby in the thumbnail, though, and then talking about how he believes Abby to be a well-written character. I'm good job. You got me. He got me. And he's based in his statements about The Last of Us 2. So it's rare that you find a man who thinks The Last of Us 2 is well done. So you gotta give him the points when it happens.
have role models to look up to that feature toxic behavior with a diluted superiority complex. Again,
how is that not a flaw? They're not perfect then. If they behave toxically and have a diluted superiority complex, then they aren't perfect.
This problem barely exists when it comes to anything outside of Western-made markets. Asian media has badass women aplenty, and those characters feel relatable and badass while still having flaws and fears, cause that's what humans are. If anyone watching this is in any position of power with some franchise or whatever, please try to understand that I'm not saying we need less female characters or heroes. If anything, we need more of them. But we need more female characters that aren't toxic assholes that think they're better than everyone. Basically, less superiority complexes.
But
and
I like it when women are toxic assholes who think they're better than everyone. Oh, look, it's me.
More actual human characters.
What the fuck? That was so bizarre. I just paused it at that random spot.
Basically,
I know it's talking about whatever characters on screen,
complexes
but that's funny.
And more actual human characters that emote and have feelings. But of course, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong and you all think I'm an idiot, which is totally plausible. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope this video
I was pleasantly surprised by this video. I expected this video to be a lot worse, okay? A lot worse. Now, I'm interested to see how the woke Spider-Man video, how this one goes. But I'm very surprised by this video. I didn't completely disagree with him on everything he said like I was expecting to. He got me with the clickbait. So, but he was pretty based throughout a decent portion of the video, which I was not expecting. So, maybe he just surprised me because I went in with such a low expectation. But he did pretty good. He could have done better, but he did pretty good. I would say that his opinions were valid. Like, I would say that, like, he didn't make really any statements that were so outlandishly, like, off the wall, like I was expecting him to. Like, him not vibing with Aloy is fine. Like, it's not that big of a deal. He's not the only person out there who doesn't find Aloy relatable, and that's not, like, against the law or anything. Like, that's not that big of a deal in my opinion. I can't think of any sweeping statements that he made that were so outlandish and unruly in this video. There were definitely some I didn't agree with, and definitely some that I thought were dumb. But most of them were just, and especially because he often phrased them as like, to me, or in my opinion. And yeah, they may not have fit those characters perfectly, but his ideas were valid. I absolutely agree with a lot of the statements he was making, even if they didn't apply to the exact characters he was applying them to. In my opinion, I overall did agree with a lot of what he said. Which again, that doesn't happen a lot during our brain rot sessions. So we'll give him the points, I guess. But we'll see if he loses those points during this video, because he very well could. I have played Spider-Man 2 in its entirety. I believe I 100%ed the game, so this should be interesting.
What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and if you own a PlayStation 5, you're probably playing Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which I have completed myself and snagged my 147th Platinum trophy thanks to it. Overall, I thought the game was good, but its story, in my opinion, lacked the emotional beats of the original. I felt many villains in Spider-Man 2 were not explored enough, or they were wasted for story purposes. And I also think Spider-Man 2 doesn't fix the prevailing problem that many AAA open-world games have, which is side content that oftentimes feels tedious or dubious at best. Like how in one mission, Miles can help a blind old lady and eventually gift her a robotic dog as a pet. Sure, it sounds cute, but dude, if that dog bugs out even once, that lady will be turned into human sushi, but whatever, it's content I guess. And the lady is blind, so there's some inclusiveness for you too. And speaking about inclusiveness, that's kind of what this video is all about. How Insomniac has filled Spider-Man 2 to the brim with pandering, to the point that it feels like it overshadows other key features. Don't worry, no spoilers for the story or anything, but all I'll say is that the game makes it very clear that Insomniac has plans to eventually phase Peter Parker out of the role of Spider-Man and instead make Miles the main character.
I love pandering? Because there's representation in New York City. Okay.
And I, for one, am not cool with that.
This is what happens when Jimmy picks like with balanced
Peter
arguments.
is Spider-Man, always and forever in my mind. Miles, like I've explained before, is Miles, and he needs his own identity instead of co-opting another. But I'll talk about Miles more later on.
Well, that's not how Spider-Man works. From my knowledge of the comics, Spider-Man is a moniker, just like a lot of them are. Like Captain Marvel is, like Thor. Thor kind of is. Like Captain America is. Like a lot of those are monikers that are meant to be passed from one character to another. But I don't know. I'm not a big comic buff, so it's not that big of a deal to me, to be honest. So.
But for now, this brings us to this article from The Gamer titled, "Queerness is Everywhere in Spider-Man 2.
It takes place in New York City. What do you want? If there were no queer shit in the game, it would be inaccurate. It would be an inaccurate representation of New York City, okay? To be honest, it's not queer enough. But, you know. Everyone can have opinions. I would just prefer if their opinions were based on verifiable facts. Yeah. That's how I feel.
Author of this article, Jade King, praises Insomniac for filling the game to the brim with identity politics. She uses Black Cat as a core example, stating that Insomniac confirms Black Cat is bisexual in the game, since she openly states she now has a girlfriend. Jade King is very happy about this. But if they read a Spider-Man comic before, they know this is nothing new and Black Cat has been bi for years now. But of course they didn't read a comic. This is a modern games journalist we're talking about. It's only
But
about...
that's in the comics. Isn't the Insomniac universe, didn't they confirm that the Insomniac universe is separate from the comic book universe? Didn't they confirm that it's a different one? Like in the oh my god, my brain just blanked. Oh god. The animated Spider-Man movies that have been coming out. Spider-Verse. In the Spider-Verse movies, wasn't it kind of confirmed that the Insomniac universe is separate from the comic universes? So this version of Black Cat is bisexual? Or am I confused? It's very possible that I'm confused.
Window dressing for them, where things need to be plainly stated and pointed out to them like toddlers in order for them to recognize things. Jade even uses Black Cat's bisexual identity as a gotcha towards the male gaze when they say, Black Cat's bisexual identity fits brilliantly with her character as a seductive burglar willing to pull vulnerable men into her grasp before taking advantage of them, only to subvert their pursuits in favor of loving another woman. Wow, so progressive, just so amazing. Don't you love it when these journos think they've discovered a new element on the periodic table while being completely
Hold on, what did he say that was supposed to be?
in favor of loving a men into her identity and pointed out to them like toddlers in order for them to recognize things. Jade even uses Black Cat's bisexual identity as a gotcha towards the male gaze when they say, Black Cat's bisexual...
How is that a gotcha towards the male gaze? Does he just not know what the male gaze is? Because this isn't a gotcha towards the male gaze. This is just a subversion of expectations. Has nothing to do with the male gaze.
Identity fits
I think he just doesn't know what the male gaze
just
is.
so amazing. Don't you love it when these journos think they've discovered a new element on the periodic table while being completely oblivious that the thing they're convinced that they discovered has always been there all along and everyone but them has known about it already? Because that's what this Black Cat nonsense is. But it doesn't stop there, nor does the pandering. At one point in Spider-Man 2's many side quests, you even get to play as Miles' deaf girlfriend, who personally, for me anyway, the chemistry between these two feels incredibly forced and not at all natural. Haley is deaf, and she was introduced in...
Do I disagree with that? I'm trying to remember their interactions in the game. It's been a minute since I've played it. I feel like I thought it was cute. Do you remember how I felt about it, Jimmy? I feel like I thought their chemistry was cute. Especially because Miles was so nervous every time they interacted. I feel like I remember being like, oh, they're cute.
Spider-Man Miles Morales as a side character who likes to spray paint art on walls. Insomniac clearly loves her so much that they decided to not listen to fans when they told them that we don't want to play anyone but superpowered beings. So now, of course, you get an entire mission where you can now play as Haley. This is incredible. This is so inclusive, dear viewer, because now you can walk and take elevators and even slowly...
It's a puzzle section. God forbid they put a puzzle section in a game.
Drag an analog stick over to paint stuff on walls. Because I don't know...
It was it was boring. But, like Jimmy said, I got bored a lot. Yeah.
About you, but when I play a game called Spider-Man 2,
The game overall was fairly boring, so...
I'm not playing a normal human being doing normal, boring people
I
stuff.
enjoyed the fighting. The fighting was great, but overall, I would say Spider-Man 2 was a bit more boring than the Spider-Man 1, but...
In a game where I can fight mutant lizards or shoot Bukake alien goo out of my body, the game is simply not complete for me. Thankfully, the Haley mission is just that. It's one single mission. But by God, could I not wait for it to end, since I don't play Spider-Man to be a normal person. I play it so I can yeet myself at 200 miles per hour over city buildings while kicking mentally deranged criminals in their chest cavity, while calling them names. Because that's what Spider-Man does. But alas, we must pander for gameplay, and customer satisfaction must be sacrificed in the name of the glorious message itself. Then it shall be done by Western developers, I guess. But usually when it comes to these AAA westernized games, it's the same thing as always, which is that it's pandering. All of it. Every single detail, flag, or forced non-main character mission. It's all just pandering for the sake of gaming journalism.
I don't understand the concept of pandering. Like, I don't understand the concept of the word. Like, why are we calling it... Like, isn't one of the purposes of media to make shit people want and make shit that represents the people playing it? Like, how is it pandering to do what part of the purpose of media is? Like, obviously, yes, a large purpose in media is escapism, but isn't another large purpose of media representation? Like, isn't that the point of media, is to see ourselves in a different light or to escape from our normal worlds? Like, isn't that kind of the point of it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like, I know pandering is often like I can't think of any examples that I would classify as like pandering outside of like the woman up scene in Endgame or something, where it's like, it's done for a moment to like make everybody clap. So like the entirety of the most recent Spider-Man MCU film, whichever home that was, No Way Home, Far From Home, whichever fucking one the newest one was, like that whole movie was just pandering like that. But I didn't hear anyone complaining about it using the word pandering, even though that whole movie was just nostalgia bait and pandering. That's what the whole fucking movie was. But because it wasn't woke pandering, people didn't talk about it being pandering, if that makes sense. Also, I don't understand that, like, yes, the Haley mission was boring, but so were a lot of the Spider-Man missions and a lot of the Miles missions. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, but...
journalists so that they write articles like the one the gamer did. But like Spider-Man 2's story says, everything is about balance, and for every bright and happy representational act, there must be an equal dose of sobering reality that exposes all of this for what it really is. Previously, I stated, but it bears repeating, that Insomniac in their pandering hilariously managed to forget Miles was Puerto Rican and put the Cuban flag instead.
Yeah, that was
which
funny.
was not only tone deaf, but laughable to see, because it showed that even when companies pander, they always oust themselves as not doing these things for genuine reasons. How do you pander as hard as you do in Spider-Man 2 and fail to realize the nationality of your beloved other Spider-Man that you desperately want to push to overshadow the original?
That was funny.
You do it
That was
because no
funny.
matter what companies try to do in order to convince you, these companies will always tell on themselves. They will always
Well,
lie.
yeah, they're corporations. They're here for money. They're not here to make you like yourself or feel good. They're here to take your money. And if they have to make you like yourself to take your money easier, then they will. They're corporations. That's the point. We live in a capitalistic society. That's the point.
Ways to slip up unintentionally and prove that these things are there simply for reasons like ESG.
Also, we know that that's why it's there. We know it's there so they can take our money. Like, that's... Like, during Pride Month, for example, we know that the only reason everyone's putting pride flags in their logos is because they want to take our money. It has nothing to do with the fact of them wanting us to have more rights, because if that were true, then they would help us get more rights because they have all of the money. But they don't do that. Instead, they turn their logos rainbow for a month and sell shit with rainbows on it at often incredibly expensive prices, and then they vanish off the face of the earth for the rest of the year in terms of supporting the queer community. Like, it's, we know that they don't care. Like, that's, I feel like we're all pretty aware of it at this point, but apparently these people aren't. So
to increase stuff like DEI, or Diversity Equity Index. It's extra hilarious because Miles has a Puerto Rican suit, and at least they get that one right. If they got the suits flag wrong, that would have been delicious irony, but alas, at least someone over there knows their flags. But also, when I say these companies just push diversity for diversity's sake and never actually fully embrace or believe in their ideals, I truly mean it. And whenever I see a big game push these kinds of stuff, I immediately always think to myself, impressive, very nice. Now let's see the Middle Eastern version. Which brings us to this article titled, Marvel Spider-Man 2 Removes Pride Flags in Middle East Version. Of course you guys did. You can always count on these companies to pander where they can, and immediately bend the knee and erase all of their brave inclusiveness when it comes to profits. If Insomniac and Sony...
Yeah, they always do that. Thank you for stating the obvious. Like, I don't know how this is a woke culture war thing. This is just how it works. Like this... whatever. Okay.
Actually cared about their diversity, they would simply refuse to sell the game in the Middle East. And
Yes,
force
they
the Middle
would.
East to bend their knee to their whims, but instead, of course, they do the
But they don't, because they're a corporation, and they're about making money. Yeah.
And it worked out for them, of course, since Spider-Man 2 sold 2.5 million copies in under 24 hours, which is a new personal high score for Sony's first-party games, and I mean, good for them. The game is actually great when you stick to what actually matters in a game called Spider-Man. When you're swinging around, beating up criminals, and slapping disabled scientists who turn into lizards around, the game is a fun time, no alcohol required, as one of my favorite YouTubers would say. But other times, you're constantly fed these pandering woke things whenever they can. Mind you, many of Miles' side missions, they feel like afterthoughts. And most of the time, I found Miles to be kind of an afterthought in the game's story until near the end. You even have a side mission where you have to help a student ask his boyfriend to prom. And it's not even that the pandering is whatever. It's also that Miles' missions are mostly just annoying in terms of how you do them.
I have to
Peter's
agree with him on
missions,
that.
shit is blowing up constantly, and he's facing existential Lovecraftian mental crises. And he's shooting splooge goo on baddies constantly. And in Miles, you
I
just
fully agree.
help a kid ask another kid out to prom, or you find a school mascot that is being held captive.
Yeah.
I get that Miles is supposed to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but Jesus Christ, dude, are his missions boring to play through. I wouldn't blame anyone for ignoring Miles' side content, and I wouldn't even say it's because you don't like diversity or inclusiveness. It's simply because this is a video game where I can do crazy shit like swing through the city on my wingsuit and fight Kraven's goons, yet you got me here holding down a button as some random normal human sprays paint on a wall. Not to mention the game also pushes Mary Jane missions on you too, and while many fans told Insomniac that we don't want these, of course they said nah, screw that, and they pushed it anyway. Now Mary Jane is Claire Redfield from Resident Evil meets Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, and all her missions do
She was very Claire Redfield. I gotta give him that comparison. She was very clear coded, and in the I feel like someone said that when we got to that part of the game.
make the bad guys in the game seem pathetic. Like, I guess slight spoiler sort of, but not really. Anyway, one mission has Mary Jane infiltrating a camp full of Kraven's hunters. And these enemies are supposed to be apex predators. Like, their entire shtick is that they literally are bred to hunt things by using their senses. Yet an ordinary New York City human with a taser is able to single-handedly stealth through a camp and take out loads of goons. This doesn't make Mary Jane badass to me. If anything, it makes the villains look incompetent, and it lessens their foreboding nature. Why should I take these hunter dudes seriously when Mary Jane with a taser can take them out? And these guys are a threat to New York City? Really? Please stop doing this, game developers. If I play a video game where I'm a super-powered badass, the last things players want to do is play the typical your powers are lost
you said
mission,
that already.
or switch where it really matters. These companies, whether it's Sony, Microsoft, or others, will all fold like lawn kisses
said that already.
and illicit sequences. But these are all the product will still work when it's sold in Middle Eastern countries or wherever else.
Ironically, he's making arguments that people on my side of the aisle complain about like how they will put representation in things and then but do it in a way where they can easily remove it for like the Chinese release or the Middle Eastern release, or when they release it into cultures and into areas where it's not as okay to have those things. Like, that's something that people on the left will complain about because it shows that they are just putting representation in for money and not for actual genuine, we care about your representation. But he's approaching it from a more centristic or even slightly right of the aisle perspective, which is very strange to hear it framed up that way, if that makes any sense, because he's bringing shit in like DEI scores and shit, which is really only something people on the right side of the aisle talk about. It's like a right-wing talking point to talk about like, oh, were they just trying to get money by putting in for the DEI scores and blah blah blah. Like, that's a argument that people put in, but he's making arguments that I agree with about how the representation is just there for money, but he's saying it as if it's like that putting it in at all makes it bad, even if they're only putting it in for money. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, I don't know, it's just weird to hear an argument that I would generally agree with framed up in a way that I disagree with. It's very strange.
That sort of thing. If these companies actually did care about representation, they wouldn't hold back. But money is and always will be the prime reason for any of these things existing. No amount of virtue signaling will stop any corporation.
Yeah, he's repeating
something
himself,
cooked up by liberal white people to pander to audiences they don't understand. Latin people are not victims, and fans have made it abundantly clear that whenever this kind of crap shows up in media, that their language is based. And fans have made it abundantly clear that whenever this kind of crap shows up in media, that their language is based solely on male and female variations, and that's it. One Twitter user perfectly puts it by saying white Americans changing another country's language to make themselves feel better. And that's exactly it. You see, you might be watching this video and thinking, isn't he beyond racist? Is he against inclusivity? But
I would agree as well. I believe the phrase Latinx was invented by a white person. A non-Latino white person, I should say. I think. I could be wrong. But I know, like, the term African American, for example, was not created by a black person. That's definitely a consistent issue that us as white people like to do over and over again, is come up with ways to make us feel better about the racism and stuff we perpetuate. But you hate that term? Which term? African American? Yeah, I do too. I think it's stupid, and it doesn't apply to most of the people that people use it to talk about. Most black people aren't African American, or if they are African American, it's like several generations removed, to where they're not really African American anymore. And that's why most black people don't use the term African American at this point. Honestly, I think African American is phased out in a lot of situations, not just in the black community, but a lot of white people have stopped using it as well. That'd be like calling me Irish American. Like, how? Like, how am I Irish American? Like, the fuck? You know what I mean? It just doesn't work.
Truth is that I just don't naturally look at a group of people or individuals and immediately think that as a white person myself, that I have to save them or something. That me as a
white people as a whole do have a savior complex.
I have a moral duty to be your savior because I am simply white. It's utterly ridiculous, and you'll never catch me calling someone Latinx, as it's been made clear by fans who speak that language that they'd rather you
Latinx? It's Latinx. If you're gonna say it, at least say it right.
call them a slur than Latinx anyway, but these woke liberal companies have an overlaying white savior complex to their way of thinking. They have to save you, they have to help you, they have to represent you. Because you are just a weak person of color, and you're just so weak and vulnerable. How can you, as a person who is not white, understand the power and privilege that a white person has? Please take their white liberal hand so we can uplift you from your state of poverty and weakness. For white people will save you all in the end, because white people, after all, are the ones mostly pushing dumb shit like Latinx and pandering anyway. You guys don't need saving. Nobody is somehow better than others because of their skin tone. And these companies need to stop pandering like this because it's so obvious it's barely skin deep. Calling someone Latinx unironically is probably one of the most insulting things you can do to someone of that culture. It's the same way when you see or hear a white person look you dead in the eyes and say, "Oh, we're hiring you for diversity." These woke weirdos genuinely believe it's their moral duty to uplift you. Like, without the
I hate the whole "you don't need saving" argument. And now, of course, I'm white, so I'm coming at it from a perspective of a white person. But I like to think that I'm somewhat educated on the topic. But I'm still white. I still only have my experience to draw from. But when he says things like "you all don't need saving," that implies that white people don't have a part in making things better. And at least to me, that's what it feels like is being implied. Now, obviously, terms like Latinx, of course, which is something that I know a lot of the Latin community does not appreciate, that a lot of Latinos don't like the term Latinx, but some do use the term. Now, things like that, where it's very performative white saviorism that happens, like that's an issue. But at the same time, if white people don't step up when they are asked to by the communities that we want to help improve the lives of, nothing's going to change, because at the end of the day, white people are still the ones with the power. At the end of the day, change won't happen unless white people are on board with it. And while we shouldn't be the ones leading the charge in a lot of the cases, because it's not our people that need the help necessarily, especially when it comes to things like battling racism and stuff, we absolutely need to put our voices with it and stand behind the people who are leading the charge, because they can't get anything done unless we help them, because at the end of the day, it's still all white people in charge of everything. And so it's kind of on us to help lift the load, if that makes sense. And so phrasing it as like, oh, you're not the victims, like as if as if minorities aren't actually victimized in our culture, and not in like a, oh, poor you're a victim, but as in like they are literally put down by every facet of our society. Like the structure of our society makes it harder for people of color to be people. To deny that is just to deny reality, unfortunately. Like that's just how it is. Like I don't know how to tell you that racism is baked into the fabric of our society, but it is. And I know the whole victim thing is like I feel like it's a fairly common talking point that I see more often now, of like, well, I'm not a victim, which, like, no, you don't have to label yourself as a victim. But if you are black, or if you are brown, or if you have a noticeably Middle Eastern name, or things like that, you're going to be discriminated against. Like, whether you feel it or not, it's happening, and that sucks, and something needs to be done about it. And nothing will change unless white people assist in the change, because we're the ones who made it that way. We're the ones who broke it, so we have to help fix it, for lack of better words to use there, because words are not my strong suit.
Them who will be left to crawl in the mud without their amazing moral touch. It's so blatantly racist and offensive, but it makes me laugh all the same every time I see it. Because these companies will just keep doing it because that sweet ESG score matters more to them than integrity ever will. I actually hope one day these woke weirdos come up with a Latinx variant to refer to Muslim people. Because, just imagine the outrage to that one. Hello, my fellow Muslix or Muz-X, started on some of the female models in Spider-Man, like how Mary Jane Watson looks absolutely nothing like her real-life model counterpart. She looks fine at times, and
she's not meant
Mary
to, I
Jane
don't
Watson
think.
looks absolutely nothing like her real-life model counterpart.
She's not meant to. Aloy doesn't look like hers either, because she's not based off of Ashley Birch. Like, what do you mean?
She looks fine at times, and at other times she looks bizarre too. She kind of looks a little bit like the main character in Mask. Alright, that was a little mean, but come on, dude, you see it, don't you? I'll leave the whole female attractiveness character model debate for a future video, probably. But all I'm saying is, if I had to go fight Craven and Venom and I came home to this Mary Jane, I would be seeing Uncle Ben very soon. That's all I'm saying. And finally, I just want to say that if
We're just gonna body shame somebody. Okay,
does want to make Miles into their de facto numero uno Latinx, totally not Cuban Puerto Rican Spider-Man, they could maybe work on giving him his own identity and villains. Because if Spider-Man 2's plot told me anything, is that if you remove Miles from over half or not more of the game's story, not much would really change. And that's more
they're not as integrated in the second game as they are in the first.
Than anything else, and his main villain in this game being Mr. Negative for obvious reasons if you played the original game, when that's also a Peter Parker Spider-Man villain, it just keeps proving the same point. Miles needs his own villains. Prowler is a great start, he just needs like 10 or more Prowler-like unique enemies. And maybe then we can talk about him
I think we've left the main
topic to make Trump into a supervillain like Kingpin that Miles must now take down. What would be funny is if Miles got a villain that called him Latinx any chance they got. And the villain could shoot out rainbows that can cut through any surface. Actually, I better stop saying these things before I give
I
Marvel
know. What is that? Why does he keep saying Latinx? Like, that's not how you say it. It's Latinx. If you're gonna say it, at least say it correctly. All right, Jimmy. Thanks for hanging out. I don't know if I'll stream on Wednesday too, but you know, I'll let you know. So if this is the only time I see you this week, then I'll see you next week. Although not next Tuesday. I have important things next Tuesday. Stressful but important things. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it next week. Night, Jimmy. Sleep well. Sleep well. I'm not done though. I think I want to watch maybe 1 or 2 more videos before I call it for the night, even though I've been live for 6.5 hours. The question is, do I want to watch more video game shits? Because we do have more from him. But we can also just go to more political stuff that's not video game based. Allegedly, there's 2 other people here other than Jimmy. So if those people want to chime in on their what they would rather watch, we can do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to pick one. And y'all will just be dragged along for the ride. So, Latinx. Latinx. The dude is apparently known as plagiarism. Made a 5-hour-long video where he fails to have an original thought for at least 1.5 hours. Yeah. It's a problem, for sure. Good luck with the clean. Good luck with the deep clean. Thanks for stopping in. If that dude can prattle on for 5 fucking hours and call himself a YouTuber, then shit, why am I self-doubting myself? Right? Okay, let's watch the Pornhub video.
Welcome back to the comment section. I'm Brett Cooper. So we literally just did yet another episode on porn and the danger that it poses to our society and culture, not just for the viewers, but for the people who go into that industry in the first place. And I am far from the only person that holds these types of opinions, especially considering
Sped up. Sorry. I was like, damn, she's moving. All right.
that states across the country are finally cracking down on platforms like Pornhub. And they're really asking for the bare minimum here. Like, it's nothing extreme. They are asking Pornhub to enact age restrictions so that minors can't get on their platform. That seems like something we could all agree on. That seems great. I'm all for it. But apparently, no.
No, I disagree with it. I disagree with the concept of putting age restrictions on things like Pornhub. It's not on Pornhub to keep your kids off of Pornhub. It's your job as a parent to keep your kids off of Pornhub. It's kind of fucked up for the government to try to make Pornhub do that, because I don't know if it's a free speech violation or anything like that, but it's a bit of a step too far, in my opinion, to make that a thing. For a variety of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into as she talks, but
that is an attack on Pornhub's rights. You can't make this stuff up. We're going to talk about it today. Before we do, though, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you've not already, and then ring that notification bell so that you never miss a comment section upload. All right, so this really all came to a head in Texas this week when the courts upheld the state's law that requires pornographic sites to use age verification to prevent minors from accessing the content. Doesn't sound very controversial to me. Keeping minors from watching porn, keeping minors from accessing adult content. I thought we could all agree upon
which state
that.
did she say?
Age
Sorry.
verification to and then ring that notification bell so it held the state's law that
Texas. Okay, so let's find Texas porn ID law. Requires adult websites to use reasonable age verification methods to ensure a person accessing their website is at least 18 years old. Okay. I feel like they were what exactly means reasonable age verification methods, because I believe in some places, like there was one place where they were like, oh, you have to submit like a government ID to verify your age, which is a massive breach of privacy for so many reasons. Even if it wasn't to access porn, something that is very private to most people, and could very easily be used to discriminate against people depending on, like, because you could very easily figure out their sexualities and things like that based on the porn that they watch. It's very that, and on top of just like, regardless of what you're trying to access, even if it's not porn, you're just trying to access a website, having you submit photos of your government ID is such an easy way to get your identity stolen. Like there are so many privacy violations here for the consumers of the product, not just for the providers of said product. Which is why I think a lot of people have issue with it. I think it's a dumb idea because, again, you as a parent are in charge of what your kids consume on the internet. It is not the job of the internet to protect your kids. There are certain things that the internet can do to help, but at the end of the day, it's on you as the parent to keep your kid from watching porn if they're not old enough to be watching porn. Just like it's your job as a parent to keep your kid off of Instagram if they're not old enough to have Instagram. It's your job to keep your kid off the internet if they're not old enough to reasonably access the internet. It's crazy that, oh, you're the parent, do the parenting is like a controversial thing now.
pornographic sites to use age verification to prevent minors from accessing the content. Doesn't sound very controversial to me. Keeping minors from watching porn.
Also, it's not illegal for a minor to watch porn. It's illegal for a minor to be in porn. Like, that's against the law. Minors watching porn isn't illegal. Like, also, I would argue that most people start watching porn while they are a minor. That's how a lot of people actually, unfortunately, that's how a lot of people's first interaction with sex is through porn, unfortunately, which isn't great developmentally for a lot of people, but that's where a lot of kids first come across it, or how they first interact with it is when they are still kids, when they are in middle and high school, when they hit puberty and they're first interested in that kind of stuff. But you all, as in these kinds of people like Brett Cooper, don't want to allow kids of those ages to interact with sex in a healthy way, as in like sex education and stuff that's more descriptive than what is currently provided, which is next to nothing in most places. But now you also want to find ways to keep them from accessing porn, which I could understand an argument for to some degrees, but like, because porn is proven to not be healthy for people to watch on high bases, and also to go into watching without knowing that it's fake, without knowing that it's not educational, without knowing that it's, like I said, for the most part, not real. You know, whatever.
Keeping minors from accessing adult content. I thought we could all agree upon that. Maybe I'm just a little too naive, even though I feel like I'm not anymore, because I talk about insane things on the show on a daily basis, but I genuinely thought this would not be something that we would argue over. But no, we cannot even agree on that. And Pornhub just won't stand for this.
It's really unfair. It's really unfair.
So they blocked access to their site in the state of Texas. This is from Axios. Pornhub blocks access in Texas amid legal battle. Pornhub, guys, would rather just not exist in the entire state of Texas than have an age verification requirement.
Because it's stupid. But VPNs exist, and they're very inexpensive. So if you live in Texas, just get a fucking VPN.
So just think about that. They would rather remove their site.
Yeah, VPNs have gone up. All of them. They've all, like, all of their stocks have gone up.
In the entire state, then take steps to ensure that children can't watch the content on their pornographic platform. This speaks volumes, you freaks. That's the only way that I can put it. It's insane. And guys, this is not the first time that this has happened. North Carolina, Arkansas, Virginia, Utah, Montana, and Mississippi have all lost access to Pornhub for this exact same reason. But I think this last case in Texas is the first time that it's really gotten a lot of nationwide traction and gone viral on social media. And obviously, rightfully so, a lot of people are celebrating this. The Texas Attorney General tweeted and said, Pornhub has now disabled its website in Texas. Sites like Pornhub are on the run because Texas has a law that aims to prevent them from showing harmful, obscene material to children. We recently secured a major victory against Pornhub and other sites that sought to block this law from taking effect. In Texas, companies cannot get away with showing porn to children. If they don't want to comply, good riddance.
Don't mess with Texas.
Absolutely based. Could not agree more. Matt Walsh said, huge win for Texas. Somebody else said, every state should have this for adult content. I agree. Why don't we have this already? Again, this seems like the bare minimum that we could agree on. But of course, not everyone feels this way. We live amongst crazy people, and no one is more upset than Pornhub themselves. This is the statement they released. They said, Dear user, as you may know, your elected officials in Texas are requiring us to verify your age before allowing you access to our website. Not only does this impinge upon the rights of adults to access protected speech, it fails strict scrutiny by employing the least effective and yet also most restrictive means of accomplishing Texas' stated purpose of allegedly protecting minors. Texas allegedly wanting to protect minors? No, that is what they are trying to do. That is what you are fighting against. Again, the most basic thing. They go on and they say, well, safety and compliance are at the forefront of our mission. Providing identification every time you want to visit an adult platform is not an effective solution for protecting users online. And in fact, will put minors and your privacy at risk. So by checking people's ages to make sure that minors are not seeing your pornographic sexual content is overreach. It's infringing upon free speech and freedom of expression.
That don't make no sense.
You've got to be kidding me. Like, get a grip. Texas is trying to protect minors. And you, on the other hand, are enabling them. And maybe in a twisted way, hoping that they find your content. I mean, in general, any person or business that you see that is against this or angry at Texas for doing this, they are not worth your time. A company that is worth your time is Pure Talk. Now, with inflation started today, you will have incredible service. Maybe you can get a new phone, and you'll be supporting a company that does not believe in any of this BS we're talking about today. Other people on Twitter said things like, what does age verification mean in this sense? A checkbox that says you're 18 plus or uploading a copy of your ID? Because I can understand the second method being a bit intrusive. Okay, dude, intrusive? Is it intrusive when you have to hand over your ID every time you want to buy cigarettes or alcohol?
How is that in any way similar to accessing porn? How is buying a restricted drug, is that the right term to use for cigarettes? How is buying cigarettes akin to watching porn online? How are those similar to one another? Also, one of those involves you handing your ID to like a teenager on the other side of the counter, and the other is taking photos of it and uploading it to the internet. Like, those are very, very different situations.
Or you want to board a plane or vote if you're not a Democrat state, or like you're on Twitter. This guy has a blue check mark. You had to upload a photo of your ID to get that blue check mark. It is part of life. Another guy who seems to share some of my opinions said, not defending Pornhub, but they didn't accept the verification system for a good reason. The verification process, which will require to upload the ID by the user or other proof, would require a lot of new infrastructure, upkeep and monitoring that would be extremely costly. Also, nobody wants to give their personal info to a porn site. Also, there is a possibility of data leaks and a lot more other things. Anyone saying that they are trying to get minors...
Anytime, if there's a data leak, so let's say this is implemented and Pornhub does comply and does make it where you have to take a photo of your ID or whatever to access, like that means you would have to make an account, which I believe they have put out numbers that show most people who use Pornhub don't have a Pornhub account. So it would require people to make an account, which requires you to link probably an email, and then you'd have to upload your ID and like all this other stuff, all these extra steps that most people don't do. Most of the people who use Pornhub already don't do. And then let's say there's a data breach. So now you have your email linked to your personal photo ID, linked to your porn viewing habits, which a lot of people don't want out into the world, whether it's embarrassing shit that they're watching or fucked up shit that they're watching or normal shit that they're watching. Like, most people just don't want the porn that they're watching to be known to the world, for obvious reasons. Like, porn is very much something that's still looked down upon as a terrible, awful thing, and look at sex workers as if they are fucking, Satan themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's such a violation of privacy for so many people. Like, even for someone like myself who doesn't watch porn very often, but when I do, it's very normal vanilla shit, but I still don't want people knowing what videos I click on. Like, that's my business, and that's the business of people who do watch weird shit and who do watch kinky shit and who do watch like violent shit. Like, that's your business. The just like what you do in the bedroom is your business. Like, this very much falls under the same category. And like I mentioned earlier, it could very much expose people for being into, like, someone who, let's say some guy who's married to a woman and has kids, but he watches gay porn. He doesn't want the world to know that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's gonna fuck up Pornhub's money anyways, so it's easier to just not go to that state and just have the people in that state have to use a VPN. Then they don't have to to create the new infrastructure and everything.
On their platform are stupid, but F porn, I'm happy that they are starting to ban it. Okay, well, all of that stuff that you just said in the middle, it just seems like an excuse. That's just rationalizing Pornhub's bad behavior. I think they're lazy more than anything. They're also morally corrupt, and they don't care about protecting children. They would rather block access to the site than actually jump through the hoops to make sure that minors are protected. I mean, also, did we just forget that a couple of months ago, a video was leaked from an employee from Pornhub or their parent company, I believe it was their parent company, who was literally saying that they push gay porn so that young people will see it. So that young people, teenagers, I think he literally said like a 15-year-old boy could see it and feel seen. They know that young people are on their platform. They don't care.
Let's say you're 12 years old. You're still figuring out your sexuality, maybe even your gender. Wouldn't it be helpful to see, not a celebration, but just like maybe a normalization of something that you think is what you wanted? Like putting a trans male or a trans female in a scene, you wouldn't get that on a normal mainstream site. So test it out. See if you get.
He's literally just talking about representation in porn, the same way we have representation in standard media. Like, of all the places to put things that society still views as taboo, we can't even have that in porn anymore. Like, like, if we can't have trans people in porn, then where the fuck can we have trans people? Like, if we can't have gay people in porn, then where in the fuck can we have gay people? Like,
a bigger audience with it. See if you can convert somebody, right? Like, maybe somebody who's never looked for anything like that might find it interesting and click on it.
An employee is on camera literally saying that. But you know what? Them being lazy and just deciding to block access in all of these states is fine with me. Let them show people their true colors. Now, the most absurd response that I saw to this whole thing was from David Hogg. And if you don't know who David is, David was a student in the Parkland shooting, and he has since become a political activist and a commentator on a large scale, especially on Twitter. And he quote tweeted Ken Paxton's tweet that we read. And he said, "Whatever gains the GOP was making with young men are now gone."
Honestly, yeah.
What? In what world is that your first thought? That's your response? That is the reason that we should be concerned about this? Okay, somebody got...
Who do you think it's going to affect? It's going to affect the 14 through 17-year-olds who are watching porn. Because like it or not, 14 to 17-year-olds are horny as fuck. Like, historically, those are some of the horniest years of a person's life. So, from puberty to when you legally become an adult, like...
commented and said, now men will become more masculine as their testosterone will rise. We don't want feminine men like you, David. Grow some balls first. Ooh, but I mean, she's not wrong. Because watching porn consistently does lower your testosterone. Now, this last commenter just took the words out of my mouth.
What did she just say?
Watching porn consistently does lower your testosterone. Now, this last comment...
I'm assuming she covered that in the video she mentioned at the beginning where she talked about it. Like, where she's talked about, how porn is bad for you.
Hunter just took the words out of my mouth and said, well, if they were just voting because they like
I guess we should let trans women know that a new transition just dropped. If you just watch a lot of porn, your T levels will drop.
porn, then we didn't lose much, did we? No, we didn't. Just like Texas and all those other states didn't lose much by Pornhub blocking their access. Oh no, so sad. We are all so crushed about this news. People will be better off because of this. Children and young people will certainly be better off. Well, guys, I hope you liked that video.
I don't think so. I don't really think it's going to make that big of a difference because, like I said, VPNs exist. So unless the country federally makes it a thing and therefore Pornhub doesn't exist in America anymore, but even then, even if it exists somewhere in the world, then you will be able to access it with a VPN. I feel like this whole argument still just stems back to conservatives' inability to understand the fact that children are interested in sex. And when I say children, I mean teens. Like, that's who we talk about when we're talking about children who are interested in sex. We're talking about teenagers who have hit puberty and are therefore very, very horny and need an outlet. And if you're not going to allow them to have safe sex, even, which means they're likely going to go out and have unsafe sex, then you're going to also take away their ability to watch porn, which is an outlet for that. It may not be the healthiest outlet, but it's an outlet. It could be a healthy outlet if you teach your kids actual sex education. Pornhub can be a healthy outlet and is a healthy outlet for plenty of adults out there who've learned to regulate their porn intake and know how to exist as a person who's not horny 24/7. But conservatives are unable to grasp that. Like, so many conservatives are unable to understand, for some reason, what being a teenager is like, even though they've all been teenagers before. I don't know why it's not, why people are so incapable of understanding that, but I don't know. Okay, let's hear Matt Walsh.
So there's a certain cadence you've probably noticed about one.
Trigger warning, Matt Walsh.
Once every month and a half or so, some media outlet publishes an article about the joys of being childless. And usually it's an article written by some childless woman who's living, she claims, a life of unending joy and relaxation and luxury, all made possible by her decision to be childless. Sometimes this content takes the form of interviews with various different childless people who all agree that their barren, impotent lifestyle has been a source of great happiness. This is usually the way that the child-free propaganda is packaged. But on occasion, things take a more negative, kind of dour turn. Once every few months, we get an article highlighting instead those people who did have kids and regret it. Every once in a while, the media takes a break from the look how happy child-free people are genre to present something from the look how unhappy parents are genre. And
and a lot of people would rather regret not having kids than regret having kids. Because often when you have kids, you end up regretting. Those kids can feel it, and it fucks with them. It fucks with their development. It fucks with their confidence. It fucks with their every waking moment. Because kids can tell when you don't want them around. Whether you think you're hiding it well or not, kids can tell, especially when you're their parent, if they don't want you around or not. I'm speaking from the perspective of someone whose parents did want them, and so I grew up with parents who tried very hard to get me, and then when they did, it was very happy, and I was I was a miracle baby for my mother. So I don't know what it's like to grow up with parents who don't want you. So I'm very fortunate in that aspect that I grew up with two parents who both wanted me there, even if they don't really want me around anymore. I had them as a kid when I needed them, so I can't really speak from that perspective, but I know that there are people out there who absolutely grew up with parents who did not want them, were not equipped to take care of them, and they could tell, even if they had a parent that was trying to hide those things. Kids can tell. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for.
It looks like it's that time of year again, as Time Magazine has just published an article written by a writer named R.O. Kwan called "The Parents Who Regret Having Children." Now, Kwan is a childless woman herself, but she is generously giving voice to parents who wish that they could live just like she does. The article begins this way, quote, "No one regrets having a child, or so it's said. I've heard this logic often, usually after I'm asked if I have children. Then, when I say I don't, if I plan to. I tend to evade the question, as I find that the truth, I have no plans to be a parent, is likely to invite swift dissent. I'll be told I'll change my mind, that I'm wrong, that while I regret not having a child, people don't regret the obverse. Close family acquaintances, and total strangers have said this for years. I let it slide, knowing that, at the very least, the last part is a fiction." Now, I have to pause here already. That's the very first paragraph of the article, and it's wrong. Whoever said that no one regrets having children? Like, we all know.
To be fair, I've never heard that either.
People regret anything. Any choice that a person can make in life, there's someone out there who regrets it. It doesn't matter what it is. There are plenty of people who regret winning the lottery, okay? So we all know that these kinds of parents exist in the world. I've never heard anyone deny their existence. So we're kicking off this nearly 3,000-word article with a straw man. So not the most auspicious of beginnings, but let's keep reading. Quote, "It is unsurprisingly a challenge to get solid data on the number of parents who regret having children. In 1975, the popular advice columnist Ann Landers asked her readers if, given the chance to do it all over again, they'd have children. 70% said they wouldn't. This result, though, came from a group of self-selecting respondents. Quote, the hurt, angry, and disenchanted are more inclined to write back than contented people, as Landers observed in a follow-up column.
Yeah, that's a flawed study.
2013, a Gallup poll asked Americans 45 and older how many kids they'd have if they could go back in time. 7% of the respondents...
He's actually showing his sources. I guess things can change.
...with children said zero. And in 2023, a study estimated that up to 5% to up to 14% of parents in so-called developed countries, including the United States, regret their decision to have children. These studies align with what I've found in my personal life. While most parents don't regret having kids, some do. Perhaps in part because I've written...
I'm reading. Hold on.
Publicly about choosing not to have children. I've had people, especially mothers, confide in me about parental regret, and frequently enough, I've lost count. So this woman apparently has people going up to her all the time claiming that nobody regrets having children, while she has a whole other set of people approaching her constantly to tell her about their own parental regret. And maybe that's true. You know, maybe that's true. I can't say what conversations this woman has had. I do find it odd because, you know, I will say that I have never once heard anyone claim that no parent in the world regrets having kids. And I've also never once had any parent tell me that they personally regret having their own kids. Which doesn't mean those parents don't exist. It's just, in my experience, it's not the kind of thing that people go around advertising. But Miss Kwan hears both of those things all the time. Maybe she's just a friendlier, more inviting person who people are more comfortable confiding in. That is certainly entirely possible.
I need to eat.
Still, I find the framing here somewhat dubious. That's the point. Next, she tells us about the shame and guilt that these regretful parents feel, which stops them from sharing their stories publicly. And the very clear implication here is that these parents should be able to speak more openly about the regret, but our society is tragically unwelcoming to those conversations. She writes, quote,
I think the idea that obviously parents should feel like they are allowed to talk about their regrets, even if one of those regrets is becoming a parent. But at the same time, talking about regretting having kids when you still have young kids is a very dangerous line to toe, because at the end of the day, your regret about having children is not the fault of the children, and therefore shouldn't be talked about around the children or in a way that the children can hear you talk about how much you don't want them there. That will fuck them up forever. So I agree people should be allowed to talk about these things, but maybe keep it in therapy, in your private therapy sessions, until your kids are old enough to understand. So like until they're proper adults, and they're not like, until you're not responsible for taking care of them anymore. You know.
Some of these parents talk about feeling utterly alone.
Jesus
like
Christ,
villains
the way my
past
stomach is growling, you would think I've never eaten before. Like, that was such a long fucking growl.
all imagining. Several have noted that, afraid of being judged, they decline to be candid with their own therapist. I've thought about the isolating effect of the silence and what it can cost to live in hiding. One problem is that our culture wants just one kind of story about parenting, and it's a story of pure joy, says Yal Goldstein Love, a writer and psychotherapist in California whose clinical practice focuses on people who are adapting to parenthood. But Goldstein Love says people often experience grief in the transition to being a parent, grief for the life they might have inhabited otherwise. But I also wonder who's being served well by a monolithic idea that no one regrets being a parent. Not these parents, not as some of the people I've spoken with have pointed out, any kid who picked up on parental regret and thinks it can't happen except to them. If more people had the support to make reproductive choices based on their own desires and life situations, and if the monolith were spalled in favor of plural narratives that better reflect the complexities of human experience, what then?
I don't know what it is about Matt
Well,
Walsh,
we'll talk
but I always get bored. I feel like every time I pull up a Matt Walsh video, I get bored partway through, and then I give up, and I stop watching it.
So what then in a moment, but first let's look briefly at the specific examples that Quan provides of parents who regret their children, and also the kind of rationalization. The chaos of my daily life, I find solace. Night sleep is never. Happy birthday, although I'd be happier if you never had a birthday. Like that's not love. That's a lot of things. We can say a lot of things about that. We cannot call that love. Now, that is not to say that you can't love your kids while also being frustrated by them sometimes. You can love.
I think you can still love your kids and regret having kids. I think that's absolutely something that plenty of people do. Like I know several people who have kids who, if they could go back and not have kids, they would. But they love their kids and would kill for their kids. They would die for their kids. So I think it's absolutely possible to regret having children and still love your kids unconditionally.
Someone while also experiencing a range of emotions, and not all of them pleasant. You can love someone and be angry at them. You can love someone and be irritated at them. You can love someone and wish they'd stop talking and asking questions for 5 seconds. None of these emotions are at all contradictory to loving someone. You shouldn't dwell in the negative emotions. You shouldn't harp on them.
Matt,
you should
so boring.
delight in them and want to live in.
He's so boring. He's so boring. He's so boring. Oh, he's so boring. Oh my God, he's so boring. Okay. So boring. Okay. I'm done with that. I don't want to anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. Oh, God. Okay. I think I'm going to take a break and eat. And then I'll probably be done streaming for the day, to be honest. Yeah, that'll do for today. Plenty of to stream today. This is fucking 7 hours of stream. I think that's more than enough. I think I've done more than enough today. So I will call it for the night. I might stream on Wednesday. I don't know. But if I decide to, I'll let you know in Discord. But yeah. Thanks for hanging out. I had a great day today. I hope y'all had fun. If you missed any, feel free to check out the VODs after they go up on YouTube. It'll take a few hours, but they'll be up there at some point. But yeah, thanks so much. See y'all when I see y'all. Good night.